Record. So we'll give everybody a few minutes to come in. First of all, like, what are your conceptions or misconceptions about like publishing a book? Like, what are your current thoughts on everything?
I think I have major misconceptions. Like, I think the only thing that I can think of is that I need to write a book, and then somehow the only way it could be in a book form is if some huge company
Yeah.
looks at it, says it's good, and agrees to print it.
Yeah. There's a lot of misconceptions about the permission part of it, which it doesn't really matter. And the more people I talk to with the podcast, the more they kind of agree with that. What about you, Victoria?
Well, I was going to say, and I guess this really comes from an entrepreneurial root. I was just writing on that this morning, because my first thought is, how do I get a product out? Like, I don't look for, when I say permission or the gatekeepers, I am so painfully aware of them, and you have to know how to work with them, but not in a way that inhibits your vision and what your end goal is. And that's a little bit of a finessing between the two tensions, like keeping, your commitment, like Gabby, to what you want to tell a story. You got a really good story. Well, everybody's story is good. I try not to even qualify it that way, right? But I mean, you have something that you want to share for lots of reasons. And the world needs to hear that. So overriding the technicality, which is important, of publishers and the gatekeepers, even in Amazon or any of those places, not letting that hinder your, like, I'm going to put my story out there. Right. Then you're still going through the same process, but you're looking at it, to me, more like, how do you thread the needle and navigate through it versus whether it will allow you to even enter. That's it. Yeah. So
I think some of that maybe, from my perspective, the way I feel, like, what leads to inevitable success, that's how I try to think about it. And it's not like, it does happen, but it's very rare that someone finds you, discovers you, whatever it is. Like, you really have to have like all these ducks in a row before you get noticed. And by the time you get noticed today, does it even matter? Like, you're so far into the game, it only matters if you want to branch out or change what you're doing a little bit. So I think you can, in simple terms, I think you can make like 6 figures running everything yourself. And then if you want to go way beyond that, which you do want to scale your message as high as you can, that's where you're starting to collaborate with other people and some of those things.
Also, if you don't mind me adding in a 2 cents worth, kind of coming from, the more traditional conventional model where you needed those gatekeepers and the publishers to really even allow you in the ball game outside of just what you could kind of give to friends and family. I can tell you, even though I don't understand yet how to monetize the whole model, Gabby, this is so exciting. All the opportunities that all of us have now with the way it's just wide open and distribution and new media and so forth. Those other entities still have their weight, but we don't have to wait for them to give us the green light. Matter of fact, if we're really strategic about it, and again, there's no guarantee, think of it this way, it puts us in a position of strength to where they may just be coming to find you because you're already getting visibility because of all the opportunities we have here, like podcasts and social media and all that kind of stuff. So kind of just definitely reverse engineer and put that in your brain, that, you can put it right there on the shelf and then let them come, find you when you get that consumer equity, if you would, fan base, they'll call it, but it's really equity in what you're saying.
Right.
Yeah. It's exciting. But it's still a mountain. It's a mountain to climb, though. Right. But only in our own head now.
Yeah.
Victoria, thank you. That's great.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, I came through it the hard way. So now I can appreciate on some other levels the newer way. Yeah, or else I would not be scaling this mountain again.
Well, I appreciate you all being here. I see another guest too. Nan, do you want to say hello or introduce yourself? Or we're kind of asking like, what perception do you have about publishing books today? And I'm actually going to drop in if you guys want to do this as well, so I can refer back to it. Your name, and if you're comfortable with this, if not, whatever you're comfortable sharing, your name, maybe a book or something you're working on, and then what the book's about. And I'll try to relate back to some of these as I give examples as they see fit. But if you want to say anything, Nan, before we get going as well.
Sure. I'm working on 2 novels, one adult, one middle grade, and I'm just about at the beta reader stage with one of them. And I think more and more of my writer friends in the past several years have moved into smaller publishers rather than the big traditional ones, and some self-publishing, but a lot of the hybrid ones where you get a smaller press, but you get more individual help, but you also have to put a lot more in, especially in terms of marketing your own work. So it sounds like a lot from what I hear from them.
Yeah, that's pretty much the only way to do it, though, for the most part, unless you're showing up with a giant audience and then people are coming to you for book deals anyway. And that's usually where you see your celebrity memoirs and that kind of thing. That, I don't know, they're a lot of one-offs. They're not necessarily people who write books to write books and want to become authors and work on multiple projects at the same time. So I'll go ahead and kind of jump in. Feel free to drop in anything else about yourself, any questions you guys have as we go. We're going to go about 2 hours today. I can go over if we need to. I haven't really done this before, so I'm not sure how it's all going to play out, but I'm happy to answer questions throughout as well. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing. Let's see. All right. Can everybody see? Crescendo Publishing is something I'm calling this. I got this idea. I did an interview with Cynthia Covey Holler. She's Stephen Covey's daughter. Stephen Covey is, of course, the giant best-selling author. They wrote a book together called Live Life in Crescendo. And I'm no musician, but the idea is that the basic idea, your most important work is always ahead of you. So I like to think of marketing the same way. Traditional marketing, for the most part, traditional book marketing, you're really going for this big moving target. If you're talking to those giant companies, they want you to have a crazy launch, and that might be 6 months preparing, 15 months preparing. And some examples, like that much time goes into it before your big launch in October or March or the following year. But I'll start to kind of break that down for you. And I'll be recording this. I'll also send you the slideshow for anyone who wants it, because it'll have a lot of little details, and it's very packed with information. So feel free to ask kind of as we go through it. So first, I want to talk a little bit about traditional publishing. So I've interviewed some other brand strategists. I myself do some of this. I've been a ghostwriter on about a dozen books. I've been in these rooms or Zoom meetings where we're preparing all these things. Usually I'm writing. Because of my marketing background, they also have me, come up with other ideas based on the book I'm writing. So 1 to 2 months, you might be, and this is a typical 6-month launch in this case. So I'll make sure. Pull up my chat so I don't lose it. Okay. So 1 to 2 months, identify your ideal readers, understand their preferences. We talked about a little bit about that. Work with a designer to create an eye-catching book cover. Create an author website with information about yourself, the book, and a way to collect email addresses. I'll go into more details on some of these a little bit later. Establish or enhance your social media profiles on platforms relevant to your audience. Start building an email list by offering a lead magnet related to your book's content. So because I'm familiar with some of the ideas you're all working on, Gabby, you may start to lean into targeting stay-at-home moms. Depending on what you want to talk about, you may be targeting cancer survivors. Jordan's going to be targeting more, maybe those in the medical field or parents with children with disabilities. Victoria, the easy answer would be female entrepreneurs. I know you want to go more broad than that, but that's just some ways to start to think about this messaging and who you're talking to. I was talking to Gabby a few days ago, and a really good example, if you have no idea where to start, picture you're at a book signing, there's 100 people in line. Besides the fact that there is a variety, and besides the fact that you'll know some people, was the majority of the rest of the people there, what groups do they fit into? And that's how you can start to think of like who you're talking to. That's where your social media should be targeted at. That's what they would call like an avatar today. So the next one, months 3 to 4, was still in pre-launch phase. Reach out with advanced reader copies, reviews, and send them copies of your book. Start creating blog posts, articles, social media content related to the book's theme. Develop a press kit, including author bios, book summaries, and high-resolution images. Plan and schedule a book launch event in person or online. So these are all kind of basic things, and I'll hit these a little bit later, but do ask me questions as we need to. These are just pretty standard type things they would do. Month 5 is your actual launch. Distribute press releases to local and relevant media outlets about the book launch. Send pre-launch emails to your list, build excitement, offer pre-order incentives, host your book launch events, book signing, virtual launch, or other promotion activities, promote heavily on social media, and consider running paid ads. So a lot of this, again, it kind of assumes you already have a list. If you don't already have that, it's harder to kind of start from zero with some of these things. And post-launch the following month, maintain an active social media presence and engage with readers, write guest blog posts for relevant websites or magazines, encourage readers to leave reviews on Amazon and Goodreads, reach out to local bookstores for book signings, partnerships, contact book clubs and libraries for discussions or readings, and start planning for future books or related work to maintain your momentum. So again, traditional publishing, they're really going for that 6-week launch period. They want to hit a bestseller list. You have to typically sell thousands of books, or at least that's the big idea. The last book I worked on as a ghostwriter, we hit number 2 on the Wall Street Journal list, but the guy I was writing for had 100,000 followers on multiple platforms. And he also had a group of students who had paid him thousands of dollars each to be part of his education. So they naturally, all of them bought, and he was immediately a bestseller, basically within a day or two from sending out a few emails. But again, it's everything that happened before that. It's probably a decade of building all those information up and everything else. And that's why for most of us starting out, that's just too overwhelming to even know where to begin. I want to look at a case study. James Clear. If you haven't read this book, it is an excellent book. I reference it a lot within writing. Atomic Habits, Tiny Changes, Remarkable Results. So he managed to sell about 10 million copies of this book, and he had a team of just him and one assistant. And the way he did this,
Sorry.
Yeah. In addition to, I mean, it's obviously more complicated than this, but basically he set up 100 pretty big interviews to all run around the same time. I think he did 75 pre-launch, but they all came out within the same week. Big podcast. He was a guest on many, many big shows, Tim Ferriss, shows like that. And then he did 25 more right after the launch. So it's probably all fell within that 6 to 8 week period when you're going to be a bestseller list. And he had so much residual that he was on the bestseller list, I don't know, almost a full year. I mean, maybe at number 1. Like he stayed at the very top for a long time. And what you want to do in traditional publishing is you want to appear to be everywhere. You want to be like Arnold Schwarzenegger just had a book came out. He's on 3 of the 4 podcasts I listen to all the time. Like he's everywhere. He's got ads out. He's doing this and that, but he has that network to do that. So with Crescendo Publishing, which I'll get to in a minute, you can start to mimic that in your smaller groups. You can maybe, if Gabby targets a series of mom blogs or cancer survivor type podcast, you can appear to be everywhere in a tiny niche and still kind of get some of the benefit of what they're doing on these big platforms on a smaller platform. So this was merely the tip of the iceberg for James Clear. He thinks in terms of compound interests as much as I try to, as much as I can too. So he does important actions, not urgent actions for evergreen growth. So as an example, something he would do is not appear on a radio show because it's a one-time appearance. He would appear on a podcast because it's evergreen. He would create blogs that aren't like seasonally related. You won't want to talk about the best something for fall, you want to write things that people are going to relate to forever. And that way it always comes back in SEO content. If you can do 1 or 2 things a day, they're going to keep working for you in the long run. You end up 2 or 3 or 5 years later, and you just have this tidal wave of previous effort that is working for you. So what we're not seeing is he still did a 15-month launch to prepare all these things, but there was probably a decade of work before that. And if it sounds overwhelming, you guys have already you already lived your life. So you're into this thing further than you think you are. It may feel like you're in the beginning, but you have been doing this for longer than it feels like.
And that is
Right.
really encouraging to hear. Because because you have a backlog, of resource, whether it's your journals or prepping or projects, and like how are you going to go in that warehouse and pull it out? And that's encouraging.
Yeah.
What you say. Mm-hmm.
So James Clear's 15-month launch. This is kind of a basis for this. And 2 of the examples I'm going to do today are from James Clear and Mark Manson. Both of these, I researched a lot of places, but if you listen to their interviews on the Tim Ferriss podcast, they're right in a row. They came out like the same week. They're both 3 hours long. They're packed with information. If you just want more information, you can kind of listen to those. But these are kind of my summaries. So do evergreen content, not radio or one time. Don't do things that disappear right away. Create a fan list, people who will support you. This might be 100 people either friends and family, people in the business, people that you've ever met, people that will support you in one way or the other. They may have you as a guest on their blog. They may just buy a book from you, but you want to think about who these people are as you kind of start to go forward, because it'll give you a little bit of momentum as you kind of think about these things. What future work can you do that relates to your book now? So over 10 years ago now, my grandmother wrote a book called Scars of War. She was a poet before this, but she interviewed 40 local veterans in North Carolina, in the town that Gabby and I are from, all from all the wars and everything else. So like her examples would be that she can do things around, there's a lot of religion in the book, just like naturally talking about foxholes and everything else. So religious type podcast, local type podcast, becoming like a local celebrity, or radio shows. I think in that case, radio would be okay because you can be, you're a local celebrity to some degree with that. She actually was invited to come host a weekly show on the radio because of this book. And that's where you're thinking more about the future. So Victoria, we talked about this. You may end up doing a dozen, like a one-time 10 interview podcast episode series that relates to your book around female entrepreneurs or something along those lines. Mm-hmm. Jordan could do the same thing around like parents of like disabled children. Focus on things you own. This is where we really start to move into like doing your own podcast, having your own email list, or building your own website. So I'll talk a little bit more on this later, but if you just think about growing your social media, that's just your followers, and you don't really own that. They do see your work and what you're doing, but Facebook or Instagram or whoever limits that engagement. So you want to take those followers and turn them into some subscribers. And you do that usually through offers, or a typical thing you see now is like, get my first chapter for free if you give me your email, something along those lines. But once you shift them from follower to subscriber, it's more like traffic you own, and they're more likely, even if you just write books and do nothing else, you could stay in touch with them at least monthly. And if you write books every year, every 2 years, if you're writing like a series of novels, you let them know when things are coming out next. I like this I don't personally do this, but I like this idea a lot. I'm starting to adapt a little bit. So James Clear, treat your subscribers better than your followers. So he will send out, let's say he sends out 5 tweets a day for a week. He'll take the best 3. So he's filtering down the best of the best. And that's what he shares with his email list. He's kind of crowdsourcing followers. So the email is way more valuable. It's literally more valuable when I open it because it's already been kind of tested and approved, almost like a comedian doing small clubs to get their, set together for Netflix. My favorite part, he says, don't do TikTok dance bullshit or wear banana suits. So don't wear a mask for your audience is the big thing, but you don't have to do any of that stuff. Like, you want to present yourself in a way that relates to them, because if it's not, you can't do it for a long term. You would drive yourself crazy, especially us authors who are probably more introverted in nature and don't want to do those things anyway. So here's a little more, so just some more notes here. Think about the order of your presentation, like when things are going to come out that you're coming out with. ClickFunnels versus Amazon. I like to think about this as like a singular offer. If you bring someone to a website that you own or an email list that you own, there's not a million options. When you're just showing your book on Amazon and you're doing nothing else, it's you versus everyone else in Amazon, and it's a race to the bottom. Either someone's going to be more popular than you, someone's going to be more cheaper than you, whatever it is. It's harder to kind of climb those ranks. So whenever you can take someone to a singular web page or a singular email or those type of things, it's a little bit better to do it that way. Again, he did 75 interviews before the launch, 25 after. So some bonuses he did with his book too was he did like a webinar Q&A. Like if you buy the book, if you pre-order the book by this day, I'll come do a 4-hour live on a Zoom like this one on a Saturday or something like that. He had a week of bonuses that came out. He looked at communities, not just with big audiences though, but communities with what he called like common word of mouth. So people like CrossFit communities, vegan communities, bullet journaling communities. These people like talking about their communities. So he would relate his habits to, Atomic Habits for CrossFitters might be like an article he did or something like that. Atomic Habits for Vegans. And you start to lean into that a little bit more, and that naturally gets a little bit of word of mouth going for you. He asked people who wanted a copy. So the advanced copy method can get expensive. If you get 100 books sent to your house, send those out to 100 people. A lot of people just do that and they don't know if they're actually going to read them or not. Just one little money saving method, he would kind of pitch people the idea and say, I'd like to send you a copy, but he would let them opt in. He would let them actually say yes. So example is, and I'll get to my book a little bit more in a minute. My first book, I just gave away for free. So it's online, the book and audio book. But my next book, when I promoted the first book, I was on about 20 podcasts. So I would reach out to all those podcast hosts, say, hey, I'm writing another book. It'll come out in this month. Can I send you an advanced copy? And I want them to say yes, just so I could just send them out. But people in that position, they don't really want to receive a ton of stuff. It sounds kind of crazy, but there's a famous story of, I'm not sure if it was Brene Brown, one of the famous female authors. Someone came up and said, hey, I'd love for you to read my book. And she just said, oh, honey, I'm never going to read this. And it was just like a very nice way to say it, but don't hand people stuff who are at that high position. They're probably just not going to do it that way. There are other ways to kind of reach out to them or make those connections, but you don't want to come in blindly or they're just going to say no. It's going to be kind of overeager. He also says, be surgical, an inch wide and a mile deep. Again, that would be kind of focusing on those like tight communities and everything else. Amazon charts track audiobooks, ebooks, and everything else like no other. So there are lots of ways to track your metrics, but Amazon is probably the most efficient. That said, there's some kind of other tricks too. So one of the books I wrote, I was working with a big real estate company. They actually told us that for whatever reason, independent book sales, when you count like, it wasn't New York Times, it was probably Wall Street Journal and USA Today. They track independent book sales as 5 books instead of 1. So you might sell 1,000 books on Amazon, but if you had your people buy from an independent bookstore instead, you'd be marked as 5,000 books. It's some weird method. I think the idea is just to get people to buy more independent books. So that's really for those people though, if you're trying to hit some crazy number, that's kind of something you can start to look at. And I've only heard that in one meeting. It kind of really surprised me when I heard it. But all this, though, it really works because of his email list. So when he went to pitch his idea about a book to whatever publisher it was, he already had 100,000 people on an email list. He had like a massive number. So if he had self-published it, he probably, he would have sold tens of thousands of copies. So he was at a point where he decided to kind of shift over. I would say if you're growing to that number, it may be that you're publishing books along the way. And then as you get higher and higher, you're going to sell more and more. And it may be a position kind of as Victoria was saying, where you transition over. You have to learn all these things that I'm kind of teaching here today, and then get to a decision where you make a decision on your own. But you'll get a small percent. It really depends about if you want to let other people, do things for you and that type of thing, as opposed to always running things yourself. All right, so I want to give a couple of examples of these are the things that these writers are doing to get noticed and provide frequent value. So this is James Clear's newsletter. It's called 321. I think it comes out every Thursday. You see how like nice and clean it is. These are super easy to build too. I mean, especially like if you take a lot of notes like I do, it's not hard to come up with a couple of quotes. The emails that I always open, they've got some little nugget in them that makes me want to open it every time. So I probably open, 90% of his emails just because I want to see, and it takes me 5 minutes to read these. So it's super clear, super clean. I expect it every Thursday. I know he's filtering out this stuff through Twitter and everything else. It's a little bit longer than this too. I cut it short a little bit. So but really clean. He's not actually writing it. Some of these are like he's pulling from books and other works that he's doing. He's pulling from articles. And this is the same way that I kind of create my content. I work on books and podcasts. Those are the pillar content. Then I break those down into tweets, Instagram posts, emails, whatever it is. So it's not like you're coming up with 100 different ideas. You're coming up with 2 big ideas and then breaking those up into smaller pieces. So the same idea is true for Tim Ferriss. He has a 5-bullet Friday, what he's listening to. These are always a little bit different too. I think he usually has a listening to section, a podcast or some kind of media, something he uses daily. A great question he asks his people, his guests on the show is, what's a great product, $100 or less that changed your mind? You could just share that type of content with people. Like it's immediately they can take action and do something with that. And I always kind of want to see like what the quote is he's thinking about, because they're always really beneficial. It's probably something where he's reading a book a week, and this is the one thing that stood out among everything else. And there's a lot of value, at least from my perspective, in something like that. This is Mark Manson's. He's got a couple different newsletters. This one's called Your Next Breakthrough. He has another like 5-minute type email too. Just some things to think about. You see how clean it's broken up and everything else. And the reason they do these is like I get used to opening their emails every Thursday. So if they come out with a product, once a month or 3 or 4 times a year, I'm opening the email and I'm more curious about the products. Like I'm more likely to buy it or at least click on it and learn more about that. So it's how much value you can give your audience every week. I would say weekly is kind of a minimum. Depending on what your content is, you could go as far as like daily. I mean, it's really up to you. Typically, though, you need to be, if you're writing a daily email, you have to be solving a problem, either health, wealth, or relationship based. And that's what people are looking for. You're solving their problems for them. So that was Mark Manson's. We'll look at his a little bit more. This is the book he wrote, The Subtle Art. I don't know how many, it's also sold millions and millions of copies. Both these guys kind of came from James Clear and Mark Manson from blogs. I mean, this is a really catchy title. Obviously, he was great at coming up with titles and ideas. And from blogging, again, for like 10 years, he kind of put this one to the side and always knew it was going to be something there. But it's almost like a hidden philosophy book, and like the vulgarity of his voice and all that kind of formed from all this feedback he got as a writer. So his pre-launch, again, this is on the Tim Ferriss show. A lot of this is anyway. He already had a blog, courses, and the title of the book. He thought about self-publishing until an agent promised him better results. So he was like, why don't I just do this myself? She kind of guaranteed X number of sales because of his fame and notoriety at that point. But it only worked because he had done all that groundwork. Trial and error for SEO content, AdSense. So he was big. When Facebook ads just started, for example, it was super cheap to run ads, write SEO content, do AdSense. It doesn't mean you can't start today though and not be successful. It just means that like things are constantly changing. He happened to catch a major wave, and then this book came out, within the results of that wave. Let's see where we're at. Okay. What really worked though was his vulnerabilities. He started to be really personal in his work. He first gave like terrible, like, cheesy, like pickup advice. There was a book called The Pickup Artist around this time, and it was stuff like that. And he switched over to more like really looking for love or something along those lines. And he still generally focuses on relationship type work. And this is the same guy that went on to write the book with Will Smith. And that kind of stuff that's in there is based on who he is and who Will Smith was at the time of writing that book. So he kind of advised building his own small content team. I actually interviewed his right-hand man. His name is Drew Burney. He's been on the podcast, and he told me a lot about their approach and kind of a lot of just reestablished a lot of things here and kind of where they're going with next steps. Catchy headlines. So some of these are the subtle art. That was one of the big ones. Seven strange questions that help you find purpose. What is your favorite flavor of shit sandwich, and does it have an olive? These are like three of his biggest headlines prior to the book. So they kind of started to shape the way he was doing things. If you're coming out with, an article every week or something like that, you're going to have your own natural, metrics from that. I've been doing at least an email every week since around the last like 6 months or so. So I have a good idea of what people are clicking on or not clicking on. And some of that just comes from experience. So you really just want to test things out. Like everything's very experimental with your audience. The big thing though, when I talked to Drew Burney, his assistant, is that as many books as he's sold, the thing that runs his like 5-person team is a premium subscription model. So you sign up, I think it's like 10 a month or maybe something along those lines. And it's actually like his best of his best work. It's things that are, maybe he previews it on his site or in other emails, but to get the other 80%, it's actually hidden behind kind of a paywall. And you subscribe to get these, like, it's probably, usually there's kind of an offer to it. There's interviews, there's videos, new perspectives, conquer your fears. So a lot of it's like thinking about that relationship advice, improve your relationships, conquer your fears, build a better life. Like that's a very specific thing. And one problem with relationships, ironically, is that you may not be on this list forever, because hopefully you're getting better. Like hopefully you're reading it and you're kind of growing as a person, and maybe you're growing with them. The thing I really like most about this though is it's the opposite of everything else where you're trying to fit an algorithm and trying to get this headline and whatever. If people have already kind of gone through that filter and they just love what you do, you can talk about the real stuff. It doesn't have to be catchy. It doesn't have to be this and that. It can be things that, most of the things that like genuinely change someone's life, they're not going to come up in your social news feed. They're going to be much deeper than that, like in a psychology book or something like that. And he has a chance to do that, and he's making money doing it. On a real small level, if you do like Jordan's on Substack, if you were to do a Substack newsletter that's $5 a month, and you're helping people with health, wealth, or relationships, they pay you $5 a month to read maybe 1 to 4 articles a month, depending on how the quality is, obviously. That's 1,000 people doing that. It's 60,000 a year. I mean, that would replace a lot of people's normal jobs and income. You could do it all from your house, probably working like an hour a day. So I want to talk about more like making an offer, because that's really what separates the difference. And we're kind of shifting to more branding ideas and that type of thing. So this is Russell Brunson. This is a guy I worked for a long time. He owns a multi-million-dollar company called ClickFunnels. He speaks on stages, teaches people how to do all these things. His example, he's like, let's say you're selling a DVD of The Greatest Showman. And he's actually he's obsessed with The Greatest Showman. He bought P.T. Barnum's like actual pocket watch in this picture. So if you're just going to sell it on Amazon, it's all the same, right? Like I'm just going to buy the one that's $4. Why want to pay 14? Why want to pay 9? What's the difference? It's the same thing, right? And some of that might be true if someone's just looking at, okay, there's 3, self-improvement books for women in this section here. Am I looking at price? I'm looking at reviews, but there's something there that's changing. How can I take that away from this platform though, and start to make it more of like an offer? Like, how can I make it like more enticing? How do you make it irresistible? So instead of like one of many, it's an irresistible offer of one. A lot of times you have to kind of shift over to another platform to do that. It might be that you show them an ad, bring them to your website, and there's a lot of value there. So something in this example is like, you could have The Greatest Showman, which is just a typical DVD. What if you also included 5 books from P.T. Barnum? And where these are so old, they're actually in the public domain for free. So it's no cost to you to have them, sent electronically to someone else. So they buy the DVD. They also get these 5 books. And these books kind of lean to like making money. So maybe we can even lean further into that category. In addition to entertainment, here's how this guy actually made money, his real thought process behind, hosting a circus. Okay, let's make it even better. What if we have 2 exclusive interviews with P.T. Barnum? Now we've got like more of an offer than that. It's the DVD, the 5 books he wrote, 2 real interviews, probably from the 30s or 40s. I'm not sure where these are from. Kind of some more information there about him. So even more of a personal look. Okay, now what if we also have a private Facebook group? What if you have all the Barnum heads in one collection and they're all talking about the love for this movie and this guy and everything else? So you've got more and more value there. Eventually, this is an example that Russell did. You've got the book, you've got the ebooks, the audio books for each of those 5, teachings of his books, interviews that he did, interviews of people that knew him, 100 hours of podcasts relating to P.T. Barnum, 100 hours of coaching from Russell Brunson, how to implement P.T. Barnum strategies into your business. You see, he's got prices for all these. Invitation to a Facebook group, 10x your profits without spending money. The list kind of goes on and on. Eventually, get to a point where, like, okay, if I like this a little bit, maybe I'll love all this stuff. Especially if at the end it's still just $9 or whatever the comparison is to the next thing. And this is something you're putting in a ton of work in the beginning, but your value is so much better than anyone else. Okay, and this is kind of a drastic example, but somewhere you can find comps or on Kickstarter, you can find find Kickstarter books where people have done some variety of this. So this is a best-selling, funded movie. They wanted $40,000, they raised $675,000 for this book. And it was, in Kickstarter, you do all this before you actually have to make all these things. Good Night Stories for Rebel Girls. I've got a 2-year-old daughter. Just researching this, I was like, oh, I'd kind of like this. Like, this kind of makes sense. Like, it's like, if it relates to you at all, why not go ahead and try this offer out? So you get an audio book, you get temporary tattoos for your child, you get a poster, 400 copies will go to Read a Child. I think that was like, if they sold X number, this would also happen. Kind of like when you buy Tom's shoes, they give away Tom's shoes as well. And they supported this workshop. So a lot of you all have, charities that can connect to the cause you're already talking about. So it may just be that. It may be that your offer is your book, your audio book. We're donating food to this charity. We're donating something to raise this up. There's a poster, there's whatever it is. So you're just making it bigger than just the book. Here's another example, digital posters. This is a book where they basically took stories from the Bible and turned it into really detailed, nice artwork. And I think they also did like a making of for each section, and they kind of record it. So they read you the story on YouTube and then have someone, it's a technical, computer animation drawing of this whole thing as they kind of break the story down for you. So you got the digital downloads, a poster, a second edition copy, limited edition, signed copies, meet up in your town, whatever it is. You kind of think of all these things as more and more reasons to pre-order your book or buy your book in the first place. And this one's more of like leaning into the business guide. And this is if we hit X number of goals, this happens. So they raised $500,000. Everyone who pledged at least $21 gets an audio version. There's also hour-long Q&As with the partners. If they hit 5,000, is another hour-long webinar they can give. So there's a lot of things here you can start to add that, or just like if I were to give away, my second book and give away this 2-hour recording as an example, it is a bonus that kind of just adds what we're already doing. You get digital copies, access to like a vault of 30,000 books, other conference talks. You just kind of like, when I like to do these things, I like to kind of like say the sky is the limit. Like, let's say people are going to pay me $1,000 for a book. Where would I start with that? And be crazy with it. Like the furthest you can imagine the value you can give someone, and then kind of go through and mark out what's actually logical. And if you come up with like, I want to come up with 100 ideas, then you pick 5 or 10 of those, you've got a pretty amazing offer. And again, like check out Kickstarter to kind of come up with some more like specifics. So step 1 is make your book an irresistible so they feel foolish saying no. Step 2, spend an unreasonable amount of time making the book and the offer great. This is a quote from Penn and Teller, they're magicians. Teller is actually the one who doesn't normally talk, but he said, sometimes magic is just someone spending more time on something than anyone else might reasonably expect. And that's really what you're doing with these books and these offers and everything you're doing. They want to see so much value from you that it's truly irresistible, it's foolish to say no. And the same is true when if you're making ads or talking somewhere in public or whatever it is. Just kind of a way to think about putting a lot of value forward with what you're doing. If you're kind of new to this idea, people I've worked with before, Russell Brunson and Pace Morby, a real estate guy, they just really lean into this a lot. That they would both advise you to read a book called The Go-Giver, and it kind of breaks all this down a lot more. And that I don't know, it's just really, really groundbreaking stuff. So this is Alex Hormozi. He is like one of the best marketing guys today. He's written 2 books. His first one, which is where I got the idea for this, is that he basically shared it on social media, but it was so good and powerful, and the answers in it were so strong that he truly has sold more books each month than the month before. One thing he did was he literally put the book on his podcast for free. You can listen to it for free right now. I'm actually going to do the same thing with my first book in a couple of weeks. I'm going to drop the whole thing on the podcast and give it away to people. You can also go to the website and get it for free. His is the same thing. I think on Amazon, the lowest you can go is maybe $1. So he goes to the platforms and goes as low as he can to sell as many as he can. But his whole thing, it doesn't matter so much about that. He wants to give away or give the first book to you for $1 because he's going to write 2 more books, but really because he's already kind of made his money in other parts of the business world. He's filtering it out in a way where he's looking for people to work on his company, acquisition.com, or he buys other companies, and he's looking for people he can help turn millionaires into multimillionaires. So he's got a big plan to give away as much value as he can. And through that filtering, he's going to meet high-level people that's going to take him to other levels than he could have ever dreamed before. So it's a very interesting way to do it, but he's always leading first with value. So he says the difference between a 7 out of 10 book and a 9.5/10 book is 20x the work. The difference in sales of these 2 books is 1,000x the sales. That's leverage. So this is a way, the book I'm writing about, the big idea is how to create leverage from scratch. The best way to start is to spend more time than most people normally would on this thing you're doing. 20x the work is 1,000x the effort, which is a 50x increase in input. It almost sounds foolish not to do it this way, the kind of way he talks about it. So the way I write books, again, where we talk about like where you are, technically I started writing this book a couple of weeks ago, and I'm 10,000 words in, and that feels very much like the beginning. But because I've read dozens of books the last few years and made like hundreds, if not thousands of note cards to prepare for the writing process, that's where some of that 20x already comes in. And then it's just like writing multiple drafts, making it better, spending a lot of time on it. He also says, I love this idea from him that he doesn't count anything unless it's in increments of 100 hours. So how many hundreds of hours have you spent on this book? And that's what makes the biggest difference in the world. I mean, I think you can be so niche that some of that doesn't translate. Again, he is talking about making money, but he spends a lot of time just making it like as efficient as possible. So these are the first 2 books he did. He's got another one coming out as well. The first one's 100 million offers. The second one's 100 million leads, and health, wealth, relationships equals sales. So even if your book is not about that, or like your book may touch on all of these things, it probably does if you're writing a memoir. If you're going to share certain pieces of your book, you want to share them with that in mind. So, Victoria's book, she may how to make money as a producer in Hollywood. She sends like a sample chapter that's about that idea and then maybe expands upon it.
That will never happen.
Yeah. But something along those lines. And Jordan's might be how to save money with a daughter with disabilities, because you want to think in each category. How to take care of your own self when you're caring for a daughter with disabilities. Something, these are bad headlines, but something along those lines. How to meet other parents and form relationships with parents with disabilities. So if you can lean into those categories, you're solving someone's problem. And hidden within that, they're more likely to buy your book or join your email list or whatever it is. So here is like my specific example. Here's how I gave the book away for free. About 1,300 people have read the first book. So what we did is, these were some podcasts I went on, and I actually wrote the book during COVID. I let it just kind of sit. I think I gave out 10 copies. A few people bought physical copies from me that I knew. but I wasn't ready for all this stuff yet. I wasn't ready to really lean into it. I think you have to really lean in to do these things. So what I did was hire an assistant to help me with some of this. We basically, these are 12 of the shows I was on. I think we're on about 20 in total. So we contacted 200 podcasts that were about writing, because my book's about writing. And 20 of those said yes. It was about 10%. This is literally what I said. I'd say, hey, host name. And this actually came from my assistant. You could do this yourself if you just want to create another email for yourself. I mean, I think there's nothing wrong with that. It's going to get you more credibility, kind of doing it this way. So I have like Marianne at brockswinson.com. She does these for me. I'm writing to invite you to have Brock Swinson, interviewer for creative screenwriting and author of Ink by the Barrel, as a potential guest on your podcast. And I'm getting this because I host a show, so I see dozens of these every week. So I just kind of readjusted the format. Swinson has interviewed writers such as Aaron Sorkin, Ethan Hawke, Edgar Wright, again, kind of reinforcing that. So I'm using borrowed authority. So it may be like in Jordan's case, I've interviewed a dozen parents about this subject or something like that, and then kind of lean into that. Recently, he's packed all of his knowledge into the book, Ink by the Barrel, Secrets from Prolific Writers, and a little bit about the book, real tiny. It's broken up into time, voice, and process, and contains advice on every single page. And this is where you want to have some type of author press kit. So they could look at the book, they could get steals, they could get headshots if they need them. They can download the book from me all right there. I recorded the audiobook myself. It's kind of painstaking and takes a while, but if that's all you do as an offer, you take a $8 book and then a $40 value audiobook, and you make it all for $8, $15, whatever it is. Again, the value just starts to increase, and they can kind of take it with them. And then this is a big hook that I came up with because I didn't have a traditional publisher, so I couldn't say comes out October 3rd. Normally that's your sense of urgency. Normally it's some release date like that, and you could do it on Amazon. I didn't do it through Amazon for this book. So I wanted to give them some big hook in case that wasn't enough already. To further his cause, Swinson is giving away 100,000 copies, digital download and audiobook in 2023 through free writing challenges and competitions. 1,000 people joined the April Prolific Challenge to get the ball rolling. If interested, let me know. And the ones who, so that's the basic message. And the ones who were like a business podcast, I added this because this is what interests these people. For additional topics like publishing or marketing, Swinson's also been a copywriter working with entrepreneurs like Russell Brunson, Pace Morby, Grant Cardone, Tony Robbins, Dean Graziosi. So I wanted to kind of include that as like a bonus for them. So that actually got me on, this is the first show I did, The Business of Story. It's probably the biggest one I did. And he normally doesn't like take unsolicited kind of pitches like this. The guest before him was actually like Seth Godin. But when I went in there, I was like, I just kind of asked him, as it was after the show, I was like, so do you normally, take pitches like this? What kind of stood out? He's like, oh no, it's like, I could tell you had a PR team. It was me and my assistant. There was no PR team. It was the way I wrote it and the way we contacted him and what we said, and it stood out. Something else you could do to be more like specific is maybe say, if it's you and it's a really small podcast, this will probably work better. Like The Working Writer is a much smaller show. You might say, if it's from you as opposed to your assistant, hey, listen to your episode with so-and-so, and I loved it. I think I can also bring X, Y, Z value. If you can kind of go back to, so do like a very clean, professional, promote yourself way to do it, or a more personal conversational style that's from you. Jordan said, are there self-publishing platforms besides Amazon and Apple that are worthwhile? For me, I would say I would kind of lean into Apple. Some of that depends what your goals are. So when I looked around, there's Blurb and different ones. I've used 2 or 3 and didn't really love any of them, but I haven't used Amazon yet. So that's why I'm leaning towards Amazon next. We are going to have someone in week 11 of the nonfiction course talk more about that and what he does to make all those things happen. But I would say generally Amazon is kind of your best bet. At the bottom of that, it's like, what do you want to do? How many you think you can sell? Because I personally don't want to have 1,000 books in my garage and I'm managing a little bookshop. With Amazon, they go by it and they can drop ship one at a time. So that's usually what I'm looking for personally. Can they click a button either where it's minimal for me to manage. Like it takes me a minute or two to process the order, or nothing, where it's all automated and Amazon, they buy on Amazon, Amazon ships to them. I'm not having to worry about any of that kind of stuff. So it depends on, and it might be that you do, you get 100 copies, you sell it a certain way yourself, then later it's on Amazon. You ask all those people to go leave you reviews and kind of lean into that a little bit that way. And that's something I might do. I'm toying with doing like a special edition cover for the first 100 people. It's a little bit different or something along those lines. It gives it a little bit more of that launch to it. All right, so let's get into actual Crescendo Publishing. A lot of it is similar, kind of what we were just talking about. But I think it's, for me, it's like I want to have less pressure on the actual launch. I don't want to be so stressed out that I didn't do well in these 6 or 8 weeks, and then, well, that's it. I guess I got to start all over. That's kind of what it feels like with some of these. During the process, think about the following. So instead of doing one big launch and that's it, we're going to do like a mini launch. And again, we're going to hit on this a little bit more in week 11. And Nan, if you'd like, I'll send you that video when we get to it. It'll be like the first week of November. So the fan 100 list, blurb, shares, and buyers, we talked about this some. I would start this in the writing process. Like, who's 100 people that you know one way or another that you can collaborate with? Like, when Gabby first joined this course, she thought about other writers she knew and emailed some of them and contacted people and did a few things to reignite those connections. And it's good to just say what you're doing. Hey, I'm doing this. I'm writing a memoir. Just let people know what you're doing. So that's your fan list. Your dream list are potential collaborators. So it's going to be podcast hosts, bloggers, authors, TV personalities. Where does your thing fit? And that starts by really researching the different genres and groups that you fit in to kind of come up with that list. And you can go bigger than that. I would also kind of, when you start to reach out to these people, go in an order that makes sense, a little bit based on popularity. If you're a nobody, don't start with Oprah. Work your way up to these things, like figure out things that make sense for you. And there's a big like local market that is often hidden. Like there's plenty of authors that are like only famous in Colorado, but they're super famous in Colorado and they sell tens of thousands of copies every time they write fiction or whatever it is. So think about your Dream 100 list, who that makes up for you. You could also, like, one way to kind of start that is like, if you find a podcast host that you like and they've done 40 episodes, look through the episodes, like who's there, who has written similar books to you on Amazon, like kind of see what's out there, what publishers are looking at those books. Go see who follows them on social media. Who do they follow? You'll start to see like the world is much smaller than you think. Like, so I'm doing this stuntman documentary now. I think every movie's got hundreds of stuntmen and stunt women in it, but the world's pretty small. Like if I mention someone, they all know who I'm talking about. Like there's probably like a couple hundred people to know this entire group of whatever in the market. And then within that, there's always subgroups. There's people that are obsessed with martial arts, obsessed with racing cars, or, all these things that kind of make the same idea, and you kind of branch out from there. So do your Amazon subgenre research. And something we're going to talk about too in week 11 is like, once you get in the subgenre research, it may be that, oh, I can actually like sell 12 books in this very specific category and be a #1 bestseller in that category. And now you've got this credibility that wasn't there before. And when they're searching for that book, you may come to the top every time. And that's how you can kind of do a variety of things to not only, sell a bunch of books up front, but also do it like ongoing as we want to do. So set up your platforms, your website, Amazon, social media. Don't go crazy. I mean, you can. I'll show you a little bit what I do now, but I kind of worked up to what I'm doing. So I would start, you can start with just one thing. Like if you haven't published yet, just start with Instagram or Twitter as an example. When you're ready, put your book on Amazon at least a couple months ahead of time to give people like some runway for yourself. Maybe put up a website first. Me personally, I'd probably sell on a website first and then kind of transition to Amazon, just because, again, it's like I want to make a really great offer first. And then later, once I've got a little bit of traction going, I'll move into Amazon and work on the next one. So develop an arsenal of content. You want to think of like 30 to 90 days of content. Whatever your runway is, as you're kind of leading up to it. It could be you're doing daily posts, or it could be as little as like a weekly email that's going out. And if you don't have a list, like look at everyone you've ever emailed, and like it's probably hundreds or thousands of names. there's probably 50 to 100 people that are interested in that from you. Like you can just kind of reach out and say, hey, I'm doing this. If you're interested, can I share something with you? One thing I've noticed is like sharing pieces of the books I'm writing. When people comment on them, I'm kind of making a mental note of like, oh, I could share chapter 3 with this person and see if it interests them, get some feedback, and possibly find a new buyer or bring someone to my email list that way. Set up the offer or the release date. So in that case, it's like my next book, I'll pick a date. I don't know, something like 3 months after it's completely done to have the book come out on Amazon. When I said set up the offer, I just mean like my big offer was like, we're giving away 100,000 copies and then book, audiobook, that kind of thing. So either do one or the other with those, depending on what you want to do with it. It also allowed me to like, where my book was sitting dormant for a long time, like you don't want to go and say, hey, I wrote this book 2 years ago. You know, you want it wants to be a little bit more urgent around it. And then focus on a single sales day to launch. So I want to move away from traditional where we're trying to hit a bestseller list. But if you know that 10 people or 100 people are going to buy your book and you can prep everything about them buying it the same day, you'll still can hit a subgenre bestseller list and be a bestseller. And why not happen all at once? Like, why not let that happen at once? And then your sales after that are going to lead to people that don't know you yet, and kind of think about it that way. So it's better to do that as opposed to like stringing it along, just kind of make it more of an event. People are going to want to join you. You could go so far as, I want to sell 1,000 books to do X for this charity, and here's the goal. And you have this like Kickstarter type urgency to that. There's more and more reasons not only to buy it, but buy it at that time. Whenever I've done a Kickstarter or something like that, like people come out of nowhere and buy books. Like people you haven't seen in years want to support you for whatever it is you're doing. So let's talk about kind of next step. That's the mini launch. That would be like leading up to the actual launch date. So after you kind of do that, expand and evaluate your Dream 100. Keep going with that list. You may be circling back to some people. You may have not reached everyone yet. Get active on social and your emails. Create additional offers. Research parallel events. Chase a massive WAG. WAG's a business term for a wild ass goal. What's this crazy goal you're going to do? You're going to be a bestseller. You're going to sell 1,000 copies. Set something kind of insane for yourself to chase, and then at least you kind of have this target you're going towards. It needs to be a little bit out of your reach, or in my case, the one I'm doing is insanely out of my reach. I'll talk about that in a second. And then as you kind of keep, promoting and doing these things, you're talking to that audience again of people that are making up that book signing list. These are who you're talking to. So when I post on Twitter or Instagram, it says writers, comma, ... Like I'm addressing them specifically for who they are. And start your next massive project. So this is a quote from Ron Holiday. The best way to sell a book is to write another one. He has a great book called Perennial Seller. It's almost like his underrated book of the many he's written, but the whole idea is to create evergreen content that lasts a lifetime. The next steps for branding. Work on your next major project, refine your message, and then move through the 3 phases of marketing. So I want to talk a little bit about this because like Gabby just started an Instagram. At first, you're trying to set some metrics for yourself. So I think I used to do 3 a week, then I did 7 a week. Now I do 21 a week. And the early stages, you just feel obligated to post something because you're like, I got to do this. I got to do this. I want you to like, if you can not think about it as clock punching, you'll be much happier. If you think about it as like you're serving this audience, that's a way different way to think about the things you're doing. It's going to refine your message. And then don't worry. And also too, like the difference in like social media and writing a book or a movie or whatever it is, I don't obsessively care about grammar and things like that. Like I'm going to make mistakes. Like I'm human. I'm putting out so much stuff. But, as I tell like some clients I work with, I'm not looking for mistakes because no one sees the mistakes for the most part. They see the things that goes to the top. They see the unicorn post or whatever it is for the week, the major one that gets all the traction. But it takes me 21 or something like that to hit that one every week. So at first you feel obligated, but then as you start to serve, it kind of just feel like experimental. I wrote this, the most drastic email I've sent. I'm not sure. Jordan may have been around when this was one of the first ones I sent out is, I sent an email called Hitler's Morning Routine, and I sent it because it was crazy. And I had this idea, and I was like, this is a crazy thing. And the first line was like, hey, and I said, say what you will about Hitler. And the next line was like, this is not a real post. I just want to see who read the first two lines and opened the email. And it was kind of like, this as far as I would go with something kind of crazy. And I was proving this point that the actual email was about me being agnostic about where good information comes from. And that's kind of what I was like feeding them back into this thing. But that's a very experimental, like fun thing to do. And I also wanted to see, like, I only had 1,000 followers or 1,000 subscribers. So I was like, let's see who's reading these things. Let's see if I can get the numbers up on open rates. And let's see who I'm going to piss off with this. Like, while the numbers are small, I just wanted to see how far I could go with this type of thing. And that's when you start to kind of find your voice. You find these parameters that you're comfortable in. Like, do you want, like Mark Manson started swearing a lot because it worked for him. I don't know if that's his actual voice or not. I feel like he's kind of adapted this thing. You don't want to be putting on like a face that's not yours. The funny thing is when I wrote my first book, chapter 3 is called Writer's Block is Bullshit. And I thought about that chapter for a long time. I was like, I shouldn't write that. I shouldn't have like this swear word that's from me or whatever. And then like people loved it. And then I posted it. And then all of a sudden I was like, well, I guess I'm the Writer's Block is Bullshit guy. So you have to kind of think about like what you think, like what your heresies are. What do you believe that other people do not believe? Who are your enemies? Like, who do you throw rocks at? These are all things you kind of think about to find this voice for who you want to be online. And it should be related very much to the type of books you're writing, movies you're writing, whatever it is. All right, so why do all this stuff? Like, I just want to write books. Why do I have to do all this crazy stuff and everything else? Some of it is it's the only way to get your obsession out there, and it's just the way things are to a degree today. But I want to give you some numbers because, again, like even in the course of this, I want to relate this back to wealth because I want you to understand, in addition to your why, in addition to your purpose, in addition to the things that make you get up in the morning to do these things, what does it mean for your wallet? Like, what does it actually lead to? So I've worked for like, I don't know, probably 50 clients over the years, some major, some that I've worked on campaigns where we made $9 million in a weekend, like crazy stuff like that. Every name on your email list equals like $1 per month in income. Well, that's a big number. I mean, that can be a big number. And most people are very unaware of this. And I've seen this with small companies where you have a list of 300 and they make 300 a month. I've seen it with companies where you have a list of 100,000 and they make 100,000 a month. But it's kind of the average, assuming you have, products and different things coming out and that type of thing. But this is what this breaks down to. 1,000 subscribers is 1,000 a month or 12,000 a year. Like, that can be a big deal right away for people. So I'm between these two right now. 10,000 subscribers, 10,000 a month, 120,000 a year. It's actually 83,333. 83,000 subscribers is $1 million a year. I think you can hit this 83,000 goal in less than 10 years, like almost no matter what you're talking about, if you're very consistent with this. And that's a massive difference in people's lives. Honestly, the 1,000 to 10,000 can be. I mean, this can be your mortgage payment or something like that in a year. And that's pretty universal. I mean, it's like you'll see it as you go, you'll figure out your own metrics, but I've seen it like almost across the board. And the people that are really good, it's a lot higher than that. It's like way better than that. And your goal is to get better kind of as you go. All right, so here's my wild ass goal, 2024. And I've written about this in my email a little bit. I'm trying to put a process together where you can earn $1 million as a writer through courses, books, screenplays, offers. And my limit for me is I only want to work 3 hours a day. I don't want to just be crazy working all the time doing this thing. I want to do it like I get up early in the mornings and I have this amount of time. The rest of the time, spend with family, do other things. So you have to think very differently. There's a quote from Peter Thiel that's like, how do you reach your 10-year goal in 6 months? So you can't do things that are small. You can't just do 10x of this thing that only makes you $1,000. You have to think way different about what you're doing, way different about what you want to do. I know we're just talking about books, but there's so much more potential in the books that you're doing. If Jordan or Victoria or any of you guys, you have the book come out, and you may not want to do this. So this is just an example. The more specific you get, the more people pay for something. So if I just did a if I did like a productivity management guide for everyone, I could sell it for about $10. If I did it for writers, I could maybe sell it for $30. If I did it for freelance writers who love copywriting and specifically writing the style of XYZ, all of a sudden it's $100 to a $500 product. So if Jordan wanted to, and he wanted to make like how to do XYZ for parents of disabled children and sell $1,000 course, it's a video course of interviews and content and everything else and all these specifics and where to fill out certain applications for grants and all this crazy stuff where the value is insane. There's no reason why someone who fits in that very specific niche might buy that product, right? So here's an example, because if that's a little overwhelming, this is Tim Denning. He's just a blogger. I mean, on the bare minimum, he's a blogger. He makes $1 million a year. This is what he does. 7 to 9 blog posts per week on Medium. His are generally wealth related. He used to be a finance guy. So again, it's like leaning into people making money. That's when they open his stuff up. But he also writes about like how to get known on Twitter, how to make it on Substack, stuff like that. So he leans into some of the stuff I lean into with writing for writers or entrepreneurs. Twice a day on LinkedIn, 6 times a day on Twitter, once a week on Substack, and once email a week minimum. As detailed as all this is, his real work is that 7 to 9 blog posts a week, and everything else filters down from that. This guy probably works at the most 20 hours, probably more like 10 hours a week on these things, and that makes him $1 million a year. He makes $83,000 a month doing this thing right here. So following his lead a little bit and leaning into more the offer mindset, because I care more. I like the idea more of like giving away a lot of value up front, like a lot of free stuff, ebooks, lead magnets, posts, trainings, whatever, and then having more specific content that's bigger. Like maybe it's working one-on-one with someone for 5 months, and then like some coaches I'm working with are like $17,000 for like a course like that. They teach you how to write a screenplay in 5 months and build relationships in the industry. It's very specific, like what they're trying to do. But if they can get you to that goal, like what if I were to promise you I could teach you all to be a millionaire blogger and you could make $1 million 12 months from now, that's probably worth $25,000, $40,000, whatever it is. Alex Hormozi, the guy I was talking about a minute ago, he had people pay $40,000 to learn his gym launch program, his first program, but his average guaranteed sales or increase, he took people who made 50 grand a year to 250 grand a year. So at that point, the value is, it doesn't matter what it costs. It matters what, if I believe the results are achievable. That's the biggest difference in like an offer. Jordan says, do you need a website? He uses Substack, Rocky Point, Plastic Learning for posts and link Amazon, Apple. Save a lot of money for the website, which runs $500 per year. Yeah, and there's some, I mean, bare bones, I think you can buy a domain for $10 and a Tumblr website for free. And you can actually use like jordanjankus.com with Tumblr. Like that's the minimum bare bones. I use ClickFunnels. It costs me like $100 a month for like 100 websites, like whatever I want to build out of that. That's more like what I'm most comfortable with. It's like the best sales platform for me. It really just depends like what you want to use. I use it both for sales pages and like brockswinson.com. But that's the reason why I do it that way. So I would say if you don't have anything, like you really just want to start and focus on this one thing. And it may be that it's either it's Substack or LinkedIn, one of those two. We can publish weekly content, grow a following, bring people to an email list. But you want them to move to the email list, like for sure. I'm working with a guy now. He's an Australian screenwriter. He's got 30,000 followers on LinkedIn. But LinkedIn's algorithm just changed. And he went from like most people seeing his work to like less than 10% of people that follow him can actually read his work, because he had never put in that time to transition those people over to his actual email list. He trusted everything in LinkedIn, and LinkedIn can change. Facebook can change. Instagram can change. You want to do enough value where you kind of move them over. So there's a major difference in, when I say 83,000 is $1 million a year, those are 83,000 like dedicated email followers. So like my list is 1,400, but it's only about 1,000 like actually read it. So like 400 have like opted out or something like that. And you want to have filters. You don't just want the big number, because you want people who care about what you're doing. You want people to actually open it and buy things and everything else. So even the ones who are somewhat curious, if they don't like what you have to say, that's fine. You don't care about those. You want the most important people following you, the ones who are actually going to take advantage, who might show up on a Saturday to watch a training, as an example. So this is what I do. I've got a challenge, Upwork course I made. We're in this How to Write a Nonfiction book course. I've got a podcast. I write for creative screenwriting. I've got a YouTube that I don't really do much with. I'm about to revive it, and I'm working on a documentary, among other things. But I started with just, I think I started with like 3 Instagram posts a week, no Twitter, no LinkedIn, 1 Medium a week, 1 email a week, like some bare minimum like that. And I grew into what this stuff is. 21 Instagram posts a week, 21 Twitter, 14 YouTube shorts. This is something we're about to start back. A monthly YouTube video that I host for Creative Screenwriting Magazine, a LinkedIn post, a Medium post, a podcast episode, 3 emails at least, a monthly offer. So it might be like a free lead magnet, and then like a sales offer, like a course or something like that, once a month. And I'm also working on a book and a screenplay. This sounds crazy, but this fits into my 3 hours a week because I hired an assistant. So everything I can do, everything that I can do, and I record in a loom that she can kind of take over. And she works in Venezuela. She's amazing. She like produces my podcast. She sets up guests for me, all that kind of stuff. If you want to learn more about hiring a VA, I can show you like how I went about that. And I used to work with a company where we literally taught real estate people how to hire VAs and train VAs with them. So anything that is repeatable. So if you look at this list of crazy stuff, all this stuff here, all I'm really doing, I'm writing a book, I'm writing a movie, I'm doing these things at the bottom. I'm working on a free offer, and I'm working on a sales offer. And almost everything else comes from that. Like I'm picking apart pieces from the book or the offer or whatever to share on LinkedIn and Medium and emails. And I'm doing a little bit of tweaking here and there, and then I'm recording a podcast. But all the rest of the things, like she's pulling from that. So you have to figure out, like in Victoria's example, I said, if you were to write a book and do a podcast, that's your pillar content. And a VA or like a brand strategy team can pick that apart and pull more from it. So I have clients I work with, I'll interview them once a month for 30 minutes to an hour. I'll just like rapid fire questions. And then my VA cuts those into pieces, and those are reels. And we take those reels and turn them into posts, and you kind of filter out from there. And you can do it yourself. So the question is always like, do you have more time or more money? You can do all these things yourself with Canva and like free software, like stuff on Apple that's basically free. Like the iMovie's free, SoundCloud's, I think I pay $15 a month for hosting, but the editing softwares I use are all free. And now like I have a VA do all these things for me. It doesn't, again, like I wouldn't start with this. I'll work your way up to it. And you may find that like, okay, well, I tried it and like, I hate Instagram. I hate doing pictures of myself or whatever. I just want to talk. So I just want to like write. So, okay, that's probably going to lean into like Twitter. YouTube can be very complicated. If you can't shoot, edit, write, do all like 5 different disciplines yourself, YouTube's not going to make sense for you. So figure out what makes sense for you, or think about delegating to a team. But again, all of this, like back to Tim Denning, who's making $1 million. He also like this stuff he did this for 8 years. Like he's been doing this for 8 years. I don't know what he made in the beginning, but it took some time to come up to this number. Like he's making $1 million because he's been doing this for 8 years. The guy before him was a guy named Benjamin Hardy. Benjamin Hardy did it for 1 to 3 years. And I interviewed him. If you want to go to Creative Principles, type in Benjamin Hardy, you can listen to me interviewed him about it. And then he now just writes books. So he did it. So there's a compound interest to this. This might not be the rest of your life. It might be that you spend a couple of years doing this thing, and then you take like the best of that and kind of revolve it around. Because a lot of people are coming into your circle temporarily, like especially if you're teaching a very specific type of information, you don't necessarily need to like move them up in all these different levels. You just need to solve certain problems for them. And it may be that you have new traffic every 6 months or whatever it is. But again, it took him 8 years to do this. So when I think about the stuff I'm doing, I'm trying to reach this crazy goal before I turn 37. So that's December 2024. It's a little over a year from now. And I put this at the bottom of my emails, so people who read my emails on Thursdays will kind of see this very crazy thing that I'm chasing, why I'm doing so much, and where I'm headed. I'm very crystal clear on what I'm trying to do. So I want to take so much action that it would be unreasonable not to be successful. So if you do all these things, every time you post or share a video or whatever, you're kind of cloning yourself and you're showing, different versions of your story and everything else. Jordan said, can you recommend any books or courses on how to start a podcast? I would start, I could probably give you like a one sheet. Like it's not overly complicated. It's more like your own comfort doing it is probably the hard part. I personally just set up like the actual interview. It's like this, like I just set up Zoom. We have a time we meet. I use Calendly so they can click on a time and find something in my schedule that's open to them so we can talk. If you've never started before, you can look at other podcasts you like, go through their guest list, pick 10, email them all, tell them you're starting something, and then kind of go from there. But you could also just start with people like most people are like, I'm going to do a 6-episode experiment. I'm going to talk to 6 people that I know about some kind of genre a little bit. And what you could do is like, if you make your Dream 100 list first, look at all those people. Like, what do the majority of those people have in common? Somewhere within that, you're going to find this thing that you care about, only you care about. So I actually had like a kind of weird experience. I was writing for Creative Screenwriting Magazine. I was like, we have this really valuable audio that we're not using. So I'm recording this audio of like, famous celebrity writers and everything else. I said, what if I hosted a show for the magazine? This was 5 or 6 years ago, and it was still a little early for podcasts, and they're a little old school in their marketing. They said, you can just have them. So I was like, okay. So I went from creative screenwriting to creative principles, and I did so. So I already had, I don't know, 50 to 100 interviews I've already recorded just like on my computer, so I could just start coming out with them. And then I wanted to, I couldn't use the same name legally, obviously, but I also wanted to branch out because we would say no to directors. We only talk to screenwriters. Now all of a sudden I can talk to writers, directors, actors, authors, musicians, chefs, whatever I want to talk about. And it's gotten to where I've done so many that I can like reach out and say, hey, I want to talk to this comedian. I've already talked to 5 comedians. And when I talk to them, I'll say, I've talked to XYZ. I'll only list comedians, and kind of let them know whatever it is. But all of this is an umbrella for me of creativity meets productivity. And it's like almost like that's what I'm obsessed with. And I kind of just had to start going though. You can also just start going, make 5 or 6 bad episodes, like tell them because you want to kind of come out with a little bit first. Like Gabby just started her Instagram. I would try to get 9 posts as quick as you can, like within 9 days, because you just want people to see that it's something there. Like 9 posts is a full screen, right? So the same with podcasts, I would record 6 episodes first and then toy with your intros and stuff like that. If you listen, Joe Rogan's the most famous. His first hundreds of episodes were awful, like just like bad quality, bad interviews, whatever. But you go through all that to get better. And man, it is such a resource. Like I use my podcast for my notes, for my books, to change the way I think, like I'm obsessed with this new self-reliant artist book idea. I talked to a guy last night and the way I do interviews, because again, I'm thinking evergreen. I'm not just talking about their one thing. So I interviewed this guy named Abe Forsyth. He wrote a movie or a TV show called Wolf Like Me. In this case, I hadn't even seen the show. I saw a trailer, knew what it was about. I spend 90% of the time talking about writing and habits and all the things that I'm obsessed with this week. And we talk about the show a little bit at the end. And the funny thing is, it's like the PR person listening in probably doesn't like that. But every time I end an interview, they're like, they've been doing these all day. I was his last interview. He was in Australia. I was probably his 10th interview that day. He's like, you asked the most interesting questions I've had all day. And I really appreciate it, because they want to hear that stuff. And I just, if I go against the PR a little bit and make sure I hit it at the end and it's promoting it or whatever, I get to do what I want to do with the show. But I would start with some kind of foundation, like a couple episodes that are already ready. All right, so I'm calling this kind of thing I'm doing $100 million metrics. So Alex Hormozi, this comes from him again. Also, it's been around for a while though. you want to work up to some degree of this. So the rule of 100 states that, and I'm calling this $100 million metric because it's my pursuit of this $1 million year as a writer. So it's 100 primary actions per day. 100 outreach. It might mean that you reach out to 100 people on Instagram or Twitter or somewhere like that are in your niche, or you make 100 minutes of content. So if I were to do, I'd have to film like 3 podcasts in a day to hit this number. It's a pretty big number. Or you spend $100 on ads. So depending on where you are and in your journey, do what makes sense for you. But this is for crazy results. So I would say set metrics that make sense for you. That said, what I personally do, the 100x outreach, there's an automated system that I've got set up, and I actually do 4 times that. So I reach out to 400 people every single day on Instagram and Twitter just to make interactions. Within those numbers, probably a dozen people say something back to me. Then I can start a conversation, see if they're right for some of my programs or my book, or just connection. Or it's like you're meeting producers or other authors or whatever. Like there's always ways, if they're in your niche, either they're just a follower or they might buy something from you, or you might collaborate on something. There's all sorts of ways to go more than just a transactional relationship. This is just kind of a cheat code to get started. 100 minutes of content. I probably do 400x outreach a day, 100 minutes of content a week. Maybe I'd say I do that about a week. And now, as part of this thing that I'm about to introduce, I'm also doing $100 in ad spend a week, which is like $14 a day. So every week I'm doing an offer and testing it with ads. And my goal in this big thing is to make 100 offers, which that would equal like wild success. The rule of 100 states that if you create 100 primary actions per day, eventually making 100 offers, this is what I'm kind of leaning into. You can find that 1,000x your input. It's not only achievable, but it's probable because of how much work you're putting in. This is my hypothesis. And I've heard Alex Hormozi believes this, and he's a billionaire who teaches people how to be multimillionaires and everything else through his marketing and everything else. So it's almost impossible if you're doing some version of this, if you're spending 700 weeks on ads, making 700 minutes of content, or contacting 700 people every week, it's almost impossible not to achieve something. You can do it yourself. You can hire an assistant. You can set up automation. There's all sorts of ways to do it. So if you've never seen any of this stuff before, this is something that I usually show people. It's basically how this whole thing works. There's a couple ads you do as like tests. It goes to some kind of a landing page. There's some download or free report or whatever. And then there's some emails around that content, and they might book a call with you. So if my goal, so we're in a writer's group together, our whole goal is to write a book in 12 weeks. But this new thing I'm launching is called Storyteller Launchpad. So I've got to add, there's some free download about like writing books, something like that. They get the report, they get some emails that kind of reinforce the download, reinforce the problem I'm trying to solve. And then if it makes sense, they can book a call with me. So like literally this morning, my programs sent out 400 messages, and probably 20 people followed me. Maybe more than that, 20 to 40 people followed me on 2 platforms. And before I got up, 2 people had already messaged me about this book call part, right? So you can automate this whole thing, and you get past a lot of stuff to where you just have a conversation. Like I get to say, hey, what are you working on? What are you writing? What do you care about? What are you obsessed with? You can eliminate a lot of the boring stuff with automations and just like targeting your audience in a certain way, and move away to where it's not so like transactional, but you're like actually helping somebody. So like I have coaches who I've paid a lot of money to work with, but they've changed the way I think about things. And it's just a very different way to, set up something. I don't know. It's just, it can be magical. Like Seth Godin says, his marketing guy that I love, he says like, marketing is just you helping someone reach their goals. And if you quit thinking about it, like, just making money or whatever it is, it's a big difference, right? Like all of you guys, some of you paid to take this course, but you're going to end with a book, and you're going to end with all this knowledge and about this thing that's like burning inside of you. And like Gabby's kind of taken a new identity as a writer a little bit, I think, that maybe wasn't there before. It's really exciting, right? So it's just a different way to think about it. Again, The Go-Giver, that book kind of talks about more of that. So this is basically a course within a course that I'm building out that I'm kind of introducing to you guys first and see what your thoughts are. And then I'm actually going to show it to the email list and some of those things. So, and people will watch this training later because they want to learn what we've just learned, but they may want more than that. Like, what's the next steps? What's the next problems based on the information we just discussed? So I'm calling it $1 Million Metrics. It's also helping me. It's like a windfall. It's helping me be accountable to this crazy goal I have and do all these things. I have to do them because now people are watching and I'm calling my shot like Babe Ruth a little bit. So how to get your first 1,000 followers. That's my first training I'm going to do. I'll show you how the automation works, everything else. How to get your first 10,000 followers. I think you can do those things I think you can get 1,000 followers in 30 days and 10,000 in about a year, something like that, depending on what you're looking at. That's the numbers that I'm hitting so far. How to get your first 1,000 true fans. So that's your actual subscribers. Each week, I'll show you a new offer from scratch. I'll show you the ads I make. I'll show you what I'm spending on the ads. I'll show you what the lead magnet looks like. I'll show you what the website looks like. I'll show you how people are responding to it. If I write emails for it, like for this, in this case, I sent 5 emails out about this event. I think 11 people signed up and there's 5 or 6 of us on here. So there's natural metrics like that. So I'll show you a new offer each week that I'm personally building. I'll also show you a new analyzed offer. So I'm going through just as many offers as I'm at least once a week. I'll find an ad that speaks to me. I'll download the ad. I'll buy or download the thing, see what's next, and I'll break through why it works. And I'll film all this and record it so you can understand better how these lead magnets all kind of come together.
Hey, Brock, can you just define what do you mean by offer exactly?
Yeah, an offer, back to the beginning, it might just be like one offer is, here's my book and audiobook, like that's an offer. Or it might be, here's a lead magnet, which is like a lead magnet could be a 10-page PDF book. So recently I've sent out like stuff like that. Or an offer is also a sales page. So a sales type thing like that. So in total, I'll go through 50 offers I make, one a week, and then 50 offers that I'm analyzing. So you'll actually get to see 100 offers. And the big thing from Hormozi is it's impossible to make 100 offers and one of them's not a hit. Like one of them's going to hit your 1,000x return. That's the big idea. So I'm doing half of what he's saying in a year. And honestly, if I don't hit the goal in a year, I'll probably do another year because like that's my major goal. Like my why is to retire my wife early. Like, so nothing's really more important than that. And if I can do it for 3 hours a day, I like all this stuff. I mean, I love doing this stuff. So it's not really, a massive deal for me personally. So here's kind of a sample. Like the first big thing I did was just a prolific writing challenge. Some of you guys took that. It was a 30-day video series challenge. I did it for free. I also did it where I sold it for $7 or $27. And so these are 3 ads I made. One was about the book. One was about the celebrities in it. One's just Hemingway and Mark Twain. And no matter what, that one performs the best every time. So I've leaned into just doing that one. So I'll actually, in this, I'll show you what the metrics are and why I picked this one, what the feedback was. The funny thing is, like, I worked for this company called Rose Club for Men for a while, and we sold like giant baseball-sized roses. They were straight from Colombia. They cut them out of the ground, shipped them to you that day. They were like beautiful roses for like $50 for a dozen. And we got featured on like The View or something like that. So they had all these pictures of like celebrities and stuff like that holding them. Or we'd run an ad with just the rose, and that ad did better every time. So sometimes like you don't know, like you have a great idea, but if it's not translatable in a moment where you're getting somebody's attention, it's not going to work. So I tried all these 3, and this is the one that works. This is the one I use more often. And honestly, like, so this one, I was breaking even at the $27 per course for something that I'd given away for free. So it's 30 videos plus some more interviews. It's got my book, audiobook. It's got some bonus material. It's very packed. It's a big offer and it's free. I'm running it again November 1st, and it's set up in an evergreen way where I could run it every month if I wanted to. I kind of do it every other month, and people kind of come and sign up for it. Either I advertise it or I don't. But at $27, it was kind of breaking even. If I spend $27 on ads, about one person would buy it. So I could, I pulled up a calculator because I do this. let's see. Because I'm more of a writer than a math person here. So like, let's say 1,000 divided by 27. So 37 people might buy it for $27, but it costs me 1,000. It breaks even. That's probably a better bet. But for me, where my goal is to grow a list to 83,000, I'd rather spend 1,000 and get 1,000 people to sign up. And this is not always the case. That's really good numbers that I can spend, about $1 per person signs up for it. It's like a 20 cent per thing click. And then that just equals out about $1 a person. And personally, like if I can spend $1,000 a month and 1,000 people sign up, and I can do that every month, that's 12,000 people a year. And that's $12,000 a year coming in. And then at the end of the year, it's $12,000 per month coming in. So it can be drastically, if you want to spend that kind of money. Now, it'd be more affordable if I just spent the money and got it back that month and went slower, but I don't have an unlimited income to buy ads. So it's kind of a mixed match that I'm trying to figure out what makes the most sense to hit those bigger goals and make some money along the way. There's a little bit in the weeds, but if you watch me explain 50 of these, it'll kind of start to make sense. So I'll break down like whatever I'm doing that week. Some of them will be free, some of them will be paid. And I'm also going to go like look at one. So this is like a book that I bought, ad target me. This is Russell that I work for, the guy that did the P.T. Barnum thing. I bought his book. It's probably $7. So I'll show you his ad, his website, the next page, the emails. I'll show you the whole thing and walk you through it and why it works and why it doesn't work. So you can kind of see my own experience plus the things I'm analyzing. I'll do these every week. So at the end of the year, you'll have 100 of these to look at. You can kind of go back and see which one makes the most sense for you. Of course, of this, they're going to be more writer focused. So these are both, the general idea for both of these is selling books or giving books away. So Russell, what he does is called the free book plus shipping. So he also is trying to break even. Get your free book. He's figured out a way. I don't know what company he uses because I haven't figured out exactly how to do this. You might be able to do it with Amazon, but he probably gets the books printed for $7. So he says the book's free, you just pay shipping. So he's getting people who are paying him $7 to break even, and he's getting a new lead every time for free. And I kind of tried that a little bit. It didn't really work with mine. Again, because it's like my book teaches you to be prolific instead of my book teaches you how to be a 6-figure freelance copywriter. Like that would probably get people to, because it's more like, again, health, wealth, relationships. This is more for the future viewers because you guys are already in right now. So this thing I'm building right now, the $1 Million Metrics, it's $197. So I'm allowing this to people in the audience or anyone who's watching this in a future date. They can buy it for $197. All my current students, all you guys get this for free. Or if they want the maximum value, they're going to get the $1 Million Metrics and the course we're in right now, How to Write a Nonfiction Book in 12 Weeks. So that would be $297. And it's just kind of like something that I'm doing to invite people in and really like learn marketing. So a lot of the courses I'm doing, I got a lot of free stuff. And then I've got stuff that's like learn how to do, write a book in 12 weeks for $100. This will be, so you guys are getting one-on-one each week or group setting, where this later will just be a recording. So for me, it's something like scalable. So it's like $100 makes sense for those future people. And if they want more than that, like what is the next step? They can watch this training. I think if you watch this training and get enough out of it, you can kind of run with it and do it yourself. But watching me kind of break all these things down will probably make more sense, especially for those that are like self-starters and they just need to kind of see some steps. And in addition to that, I'm also going to start doing some like one-on-one. If any of you guys wanted to like write a second book, or like if Gabby wanted to write a movie, and she wanted to do like a 5-month one-on-one intensive and the movie's done and all these other things happen within that period of time. That's something else I would do, is like my storyteller launch pad that I'm launching later. So all that, if anyone's interested, for those here or watching it later, it's brockswinson.com/million, and just choose which of the two you want. And this is a ClickFunnels sales page. It's the most basic page you can make. So all this in itself is sort of a form of the things that I'm teaching you. So I want to kind of show you how it all kind of breaks down and then what's next from there. that's really it for the presentation. I love to like answer questions that we talked to a few already. Let me hop out of the. Yeah. So a lot of stuff there. I'm sure that's a little bit overwhelming, but
Yep.
so it's very as a hidden, build a brand type thing. Are your brains full, or what kind of questions do we have? Anything.
Brock, you mentioned Canva earlier. Is that what you use to make your like blog posts of text?
Well, yeah, I use it for pretty much everything. So everything that's photo related. I could send you if you like the style. I mean, the style I'm using is a very popular style. It's like what Hormozi does. I'll actually pull up. I'll show you what it looks like too. Let's see. I could actually send you like my templates, and if you want to make them your own, you can. So let's see. Where's the button? Okay. So this is Canva. So as an example, like the presentation we just saw is built in here. This is where maybe templates for Kajabi. This is like an Instagram story. So this was what's shared right now. So this is where people are actually seeing it and they're contacting me. I built this myself, and these images are just AI. So I go type a prompt in to Midjourney. It's $10 a month, and it came up with all these different designs, testimonials that you guys gave me. And this is just like social proof I'm trying to create. So this is almost like a mini website. And this is something I showed. So this is what two people saw today, and they just DM'd me the word writer to kind of get the conversation started. These are the ads that we just kind of looked at. So yeah, it's just like drag and drop. These are all individual images where I took out the backgrounds.
Do you pay for this, or is this a free?
There's a free version and a paid version. I think it's 12 or 15 a month. Just because some things you can't do, but you can do a lot of it free. They keep kind of restricting it more. If you see the ones with crowns on them, so they have templates. The ones with crowns, they charge you more for, or you have to pay for those. Like once a month though, it's not like individual. Like this is the ad I did for this thing we're in right now. And I didn't run an ad. It's just on social. So market your books like these. This is like Bard Authority. Most people still don't really know me. They might know one of these guys. Understand traditional publishing is asked backwards, but these guys know better. I cherry picked the best methods for Crescendo Publishing. So it's very curiosity based. Comment author for access. This is also something where I just want like to get in the habit of like once a week. Again, like this is the big offer. I'm doing an offer every week. So people that see me, they're like, man, this guy gives something away like every Saturday. Like that's what I'm doing. So I'm either like showing them a training or a lead magnet, something like that. I'll show you. So this is the offer for last week, and this is what was inside of it. So all my interviews I've done with horror writers, and this was more seasonal. It's around Halloween time. I could run this at different times of the year, but it's probably gonna do better in October. My interviews with horror screenwriters. So I just took pictures and pulled quotes, and most of these were written on creative screenwriting. So I've already transcribed them all. I don't have to go back and do something else. And if you also like, you get this freebie from me, you learn a little bit about these 31 interviews. It's all referring back to my podcast. So I like to think of everything I'm doing. If possible, I want to create a force multiplier. Like they get a freebie. They're also going back to my podcast. I can use this thing over and over again. So I try to think of it very much like that, as opposed to like one-time things. And then it's like 32 pages long. And then everybody can get this for free. It's just brockswinson.com/horror, and it'll live there. And then usually have a call to action at the end. For where I'm kind of just getting started, like this would probably lead to like, once I build it, how to write a movie in 6 weeks. Like that would be the last page, but I haven't built it yet. So I'm early stages. So instead, I just put on my socials. Maybe they'll go back and subscribe and something like that. I want them to get in the habit of like a lot of value from me, like a massive, every Thursday, it's a ton of value in the email. Almost every Saturday, it's like something free, like three Saturdays a month. It's something free. I'm trying to think of what else. Oh, this is what I was going to show you. Okay, so this is like my style guide. I came up with this recently, and it's more for like, so my VA and myself are on the same team. What fonts make sense to me? What colors do I lean towards naturally? What am I currently doing? I made this a few weeks ago. Some of it's already outdated. What things are free? What things are paid? Additional free content, the book, the newsletter. This was the first freebie I made, how to become an anti-fragile writer. So I want to pack it with value. Like I'll read a whole book called this book called Anti-Fragile, and I'll just pull notes from it, and I'll use that as a blog post, and I'll use it to make a book. And again, these are images made with AI, so it's like you can do the whole thing in no time. This was the style looking at Hormozi and this other guys that's pretty typical. It's guest post, me talking, which is new and kind of weird. I've been doing that a little bit, experimenting with it. We're going to add some stuff where I'm talking about certain books, and you're kind of, you're expanding, but also narrowing your lane of what you want to do. What I want it to look like, generally speaking, what the content should look like. So she does all this stuff for me. I do the interview, record it, takes me 30 minutes to an hour. She does all this other stuff. Just kind of breaking all these things down, what they should look like, what kind of hashtags to use. And in this one, our goal was like, instead of being frequently forever, I'm like, let's focus on just the best of the best. Because after you get some feedback, you're like, well, not everyone cares about all these great writers. Like, I know they're great, but they only care about the famous people I've talked to. And that's such a like misfortune of people, but that's kind of just what happens. Like, honestly, if you're wanting to be a screenwriter, listening to Aaron Sorkin is valuable, but it might not be as valuable as listening to 5 people who just broke in this year, because they know more than you do about what's happening. So if I could kind of think of those things, I would do things like, here's 30 interviews with horror writers. Here's 30 interviews with brand new writers who just broke in. Like there's unlimited ways to think of lead magnets, and pushing myself to come up with one every week is like particularly challenging. And that's kind of why I wanted to build this course, to challenge myself and also provide just a ton of value, to you guys or future students who want to take the course. That's kind of the basic. Yeah, there's tons and tons of options, almost anything but video. And there's some video stuff you can do in here too.
So
Jordan,
like, I was thinking on like my Substack that, when I finally finish my piece, and I have this one that's focused, the one Substack that is focused on the disabled, to maybe do like, I'm not getting paid on Substack, but you can turn on payments on it. And if I started releasing like, a chapter at a time for paid subscribers, have the free stuff, but then the paid subscribers, at least to get a start on that, and then eventually work into actually publishing it on Amazon or Apple, as a full, all the chapters and all that.
Yeah, you just,
I've been reluctant to turn on the paid feature for, the 100 or so people that I have, that are, a lot of them are my friends and family, that I just talk about silly things in my life. The other one is all about disability. So
yeah, I would do the paid is probably more niche, and it's generally going to provide some solution again to like health, wealth, relationships for that niche. Like that's what people are going to pay for long term. You can just like pack it with value, like something I've thought about doing, but I don't do. A lot of podcasts have like a Patreon just for support.
Yeah.
But you need like a bonus with that, right? So something I might do would be like, pay $5 a month for my Patreon account, and I'll send you a monthly specialized newsletter of like the top tips. And that way it saves them time. So instead of watching everything that I do and come out with, which is a ton of stuff, I send them like a nice, clean, instructional thing. And maybe it's like, here's access to all my video interviews, which I don't normally share in their full length. So that's something like different,
Alan Alda on his podcast, he has a Patreon. And then once a month, he has a meeting with all the people that are on his Patreon feed where they can ask him questions.
Yeah.
But you can only get that if you are donating.
Yeah, I like that. See, I think that would be generally a good model. I'm leaning like, when my goals are so massive, I like where people I've worked with, like I'm most familiar, ClickFunnels or Russell, and then with Pace is like you give away so much, and Alex Hormozi, you give away so much great stuff that when you come around and you say, hey, I'm selling this thing now for 5,000, 10,000, they're more likely to say yes because they bought these products leading up to that. So if you never see yourself with a major thing like that at the end, I think it's okay to focus on, a lot more smaller entry items. But typically you want to have something for everyone who comes across you. So when I worked for Pace, I had all of his marketing. We had like $1 ebooks, $19 courses, $1,000 courses, $8,000 mentorship. So there's some tier system to it. And we give away, but like you could learn almost as much just watching all the free content, which the same is true for what I'm doing. But if you want it specialized or personalized, like that's where it makes more sense to go ahead and like pay for a mentorship, because when I work with mentors, like they're mentoring me. It's the difference in reading a self-help book and going to therapy. Like they could just be like, oh, you're doing this. Like, it's like, oh yeah, that's what it is. Like I wrote probably 5 screenplays. And then this guy was like, well, your characters are too developed in the beginning. You have to have a larger transformation for the audience to go through. And I may have never saw that on my own. Like, just like he immediately saw something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Another one, when I was talking about all the things that I'm doing with writing, to me, it was a little scattered. I knew it was the same, but I didn't quite have a definition yet. This is actually Jordan that was on our second week that we did, the other Jordan. He said, well, a lot of people teach people how to write. You teach people how to be a writer. And I was like, oh, and it was like a light bulb of like, that's what I do. And now when I post something, it's a very binary decision of what I post. Like, does it fit my purpose or does it not? Like, I want to teach people how to be writers, not just how to write, the lifestyle, the routines, the habits, everything. So it means it actually, like, it's more granular. It's more of a way to serve people as well.
Yeah.
And the affirmation I'm doing now is, the old one I did was about me earning money. And the new one is about, I want to make $1 million by age 37 by serving 83,000 writers. And that's different. And that relates to the email list. It puts a number on it. And I have by age 37, so there's also a deadline. But serving is so much more powerful. So especially with what all you guys are doing, really, it's like you're serving other people by sharing your stories.
Yeah. All the years I took PowerPoint seminars, at work and whatnot, and really what you wanted is the ability to call somebody up when you're stuck.
Yeah.
And I would have been willing to pay for that. And,
Yeah.
that guru that I could tap into, how could I get this to show on my screen?
Yeah.
Because you usually forget everything as soon as you leave the seminar. So
Yeah. I'm doing like a 5-month thing now that's kind of expanded. And now it's like some people, so Greg is one of our other writers that's not here, is in some of the groups with me. I'm actually collaborating with some of the other mentors now, because I was always wanted to be a writing coach as well. So this guy not only was teaching me screenwriting, but was also teaching me how to connect with writers in a different way than I have ever before. So he's showing me multiple. So again, it's like, if I see a force multiplier, I feel stupid saying no. And it's like, I'm jumping years ahead of what it would have done on my own. I mean, I've read, I don't know, hundreds of books on the subject. I've interviewed 400 people, but I had to have someone else tell me, you should actually do this, and just keep tweaking me a little bit, because I always overcomplicate things or whatever. There's common things that we do that, like, it's like one day at a time type stuff, And
the worst somebody can do is say no.
Yeah.
Like even when I send out my my open rate I'm watching on Substack, you send it out, you think it's a perfect piece, and you have a good day at 50% of people open it. That's really good.
That's really good. Yeah. I mean, mine are in like the 20s, and that's pretty normal. 20 to 30 is like pretty normal.
Yeah. It makes you a little paranoid at the beginning.
Well, the thing is though, so when I break down the prolific challenge, that got me 1,000 people the first month. So I went from 0 to 1,000. But there is a massive difference than publishing on Medium or LinkedIn, and there's like crickets, as opposed to like the same content to 1,000 people in an email.
Yeah.
300 people read it. And now all of a sudden I don't feel so bad about it. I did the same amount of work to get the results, but there's some actual results there.
Yeah. The greatest thing that you're doing is if you can have prepared presentations that you don't have to keep doing in person, because there's just one Brock, and how many times in the course of a year can you do a course? You know?
Yeah, so that's what I'm trying to do both. So like with you guys, you know, we're doing this in a way we're meeting once a week for 12 weeks. I'm trying to educate you all I can. I'm also preparing a PDF that'll kind of go with it. That's going to be more of a summary of what's happening. And so you can kind of, if you're a self-starter, you know, rather than like working one-on-one, you can just pay $100 and take the self-guided tour, you know?
Yeah.
Nana, did you have a question? What you're kind of brand new to this. I'm curious what your thoughts are as well.
Yeah, I write fiction, but a lot of this is very interesting. I actually discovered your Ink by the Barrel book by listening to the Secrets of Story podcast, which is one of my favorites. I actually stopped the podcast in the middle to download your book because I was so excited about it.
Thank you.
I think I've been talking to my daughter a little bit. She does this kind of marketing for her work, and I said I'm just somebody with so many different interests. So like my stories, I wouldn't have like one niche audience for one topic. I also have a little farm, and I need to start marketing that online. So she said, you know, you can have your author page and your farm page and just make it very easy for people to get back and forth. So you may get some people who are interested in your farm and they're like, oh, she also wrote a book, and vice versa. Just, I don't know. I'm just somebody who can't like narrow my focus too much. And I figure if I'm starting a blog, it's going to cover writing, gardening, fiction. But is that like a bad thing for, you know, does that give a bad impression to people for marketing online? Not scattered, but varied.
There's two very like mixed ways to think about it. From my experience, if you want to go crazy, like I want to have 1 million followers, the first 100,000, they need to be able to like characterize you in like a caricature, like she does this, like, or she only writes about writing and gardening or something like that. She's a writer who gardens, or a gardener who writes, or whatever it is. And that's very specific to who you are. So like I'm struggling this as well. That's why I kind of said like, well, I teach people how to be a writer, and that kind of gives me a broad range to talk about all my experiences, freelance, screenwriting, books, whatever. But it took me a while to figure out what that was. So I would just encourage you to start writing, and then some of it will kind of come to the surface. So like the way I kind of came to this in the last 6 months, though, with coachings, is some of how I got to this. My fiction work is very specific. It's not like I write thrillers, but it's a type of character that I write. And what that says is I craft stories about troubled anti-heroes barreling towards an inevitable violent catharsis. That is a very super specific thing. So ideally, if someone reads that on my Twitter, they need a screenwriter who does that, they may come to me. It's like creating a flame for a type of moth. And I'm only going to connect with probably the 200 people who care about that type of, you know, production. The other part, though, is like the teaching part. This is the same thing. So I've got a little movie camera emoji that says that. I've got a book camera or book emoji that says, I help writers get their most ambitious work into the world. And that way it also leaves a little bit broad for me, because it's not just new people. Like it could be you're brand new and your most ambitious work is your first thing. Could be that you've been writing for 20 years, but you've never written anything personal in your life. So I want to take people on that very specific journey and show them where to go, where I work with other writing coaches who only want to talk to the, you know, kind of the best of the best amateurs, like someone who's written 5 screenplays, but they're not sure what to do next. So from what I've done with marketing is I've taken a lot of people from 10,000 followers to 100,000 followers. And most people, like when I was looking about maybe buying someone to be an ad spender for me, no one wanted to work with someone brand new. So now I'm realizing that a lot of people just need to get from 0 to 1. Like, how do I get my first 1,000 subscribers, you know? And I can show you that in 20 minutes. So if I can show you that, I can probably show you the next thing and then the next thing. And then you're at a point where it's a little more foggy and it's really up to who you are. But by that point, you've found your voice, you've got some subscribers, you got some followers, and you're kind of going in one direction. The other part though, the other part of your question is like, people like Joe Rogan because he's kind of down the center. Like some people think he's right, some people think he's left. He talks about jujitsu, he talks about guns, but he's also like grew up with like very liberal parents. And he is who he is, and he's hard to define. People want to define you so they can ignore you. So you have to figure out who you are and then be as specific as possible. So I think it's more important who your audience is than who you are. It's more important who you're talking to than who you are. And you can have some room to be different. But it really depends on your goals. Like, what's your big goal as a writer? I think everyone's is like, I'd love to be at home all day and write and not work for someone else and my bills are paid. Right. So, I mean, for some people that's 1,000 subscribers or something like that, which is you can do in 1 to 6 months, I think.
Really helpful. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll send you the stuff we're doing with Amazon too, because we're mostly talking nonfiction, but it's really useful for knowing fiction categories, like what makes a bestseller in a subgenre. And then you kind of can come out with a series of books, and then you'll be the top of that subgenre potentially. You know, you don't want to change your writing too much for that. But if you can adjust a few things, maybe just like you're thinking about adjusting the back cover to fit this thing. So when people search for this, I'm at the top. And then it's less of all this surface level social media stuff if you can do that on the back end. I think I'm considering just experimenting with that with like children's books. Like we have a daughter now, so maybe writing a bunch of children's books. Did I break up for a second? I got a flash.
I think I hit a button or you did.
Okay, I got a little flash something, but yeah, I'm considering doing more research in Amazon. So we're going to have a guy named Andrew James. He's been on the show before. He's a poet, but he also teaches people. We're talking about it. We're calling it the unsexy side of book marketing. So a lot of the back end stuff about how to prepare your book for Amazon. And he calls himself a book Sherpa. So it's almost like this secret job he's got. But he's gonna be on the show on here in week 11. So I'll make sure we get that to you as well.
Yeah, Brock, can you use that Canva for book covers?
Oh yeah, that's how I did my Ink by the Barrel. Yeah.
So that's how you did that. Okay.
Yeah. The other ones I showed you, I did Canva plus Midjourney. So I did like, if you saw that one, I did like a chess piece. I got the picture elsewhere, but then the cover itself's on Canva. Then it's more like sizing and some of that stuff. And I'll have to record what I do for Amazon because I haven't done it yet. But with Blurb, I had to take all my stuff and format it a certain way and everything else. And that's also what Scott Andrew James does. If you wanted to hire him to do that complicated stuff that most people don't even think about, that's his specialty as well.
Is that the guest you're having on?
Yeah, he'll be on November 2nd.
I don't know if anybody follows Garrison Keillor, but he's on Substack, and he has an interesting thing that one day a week he posts an article, from Prairie Home Companion, and a fictional piece or a memoir kind of thing. And then he has basically a mailbag that he opens up a second time during the week where people write to him. So like, if you had a subject and you could say, these are the things that people have asked me about this week.
Yeah.
And open it up for more of a two-way discussion.
Yeah, if you can get a good lead magnet and get that first 1,000, it's like they're asking you stuff. So this automation I've got, it's funny what they're asking. Like, someone's like, "Hey, can you help me market my movie?" And I'm like, "Yeah, what's your movie about?" They're like, "I haven't written it yet." I was like, "Well, you're a little bit ahead, So I get to see what the common questions are, and that way I can be more clear about how I can help, if I can help, if it actually makes sense or not, But it's funny what people's questions are. Like, in marketing, if I'm doing something, people like for you to solve problems they don't have yet. So it'd be something like, my first course is how to write a book in 12 weeks. And then this free bonus that we're recording now learn how to market your book completely in 2 hours with my special system that no one's ever seen before. Because they want to like, well, what if I write a bestseller, but I don't know how to market it? Because everybody thinks that way. You know, it's like, as soon as you click the button that says, I'm going to get the book that shows me how to get a 6-pack of abs. Oh, I've got a 6-pack abs now. Like that's how, like, they don't really, it's like in the subconscious or something like that.
Yeah.
But it's crazy how many $1,000 courses I've sold for other people where they don't even sign into the course because we've already psychologically fixed their problem. They don't actually do it, which is insane.
Yeah. I've signed up for masterclass. I don't think I've taken one. So,
but it might be, you know, there's experience to that. It might just be that you need this group setting or something like that. There's definitely more accountability there, or someone else could watch this and learn the same thing, but they don't get to ask their own questions. They don't get to have each
Right.
other to rely on. And
yeah.
you know, you have to figure out what works for you. I don't think it's funny. I was talking to my friend. He says his girlfriend's a runner until she doesn't have a race to train for. And the race is a crutch, but who cares? I mean, if it helps you run the whole year, schedule 4 races or whatever. Like do whatever you got to do to be the person you want to be.
Right. Right.
Yeah, that's why I occasionally go to conferences or something like that. I mean, I've had mixed luck with writing groups,
Yeah.
bigger ones, because I don't usually want a lot of feedback in my drafting stage.
Mm-hmm.
And so it ends up being more of a time sink than profitable for me.
Yeah.
Other than meeting other writers, but I think something that's motivational and accountability. Like I've got a writing buddy for this winter remotely, a friend of mine, and we're actually going to the Austin Film Festival and Screenwriting Conference next week.
Cool.
Is it next week?
Yeah, my daughter will be there.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I've never been, and she does more screenwriting than I do, but she said it's basically storytelling. So but it's just kind of a, post-COVID way to get out amongst lots of other people who are doing the same kinds of stuff.
And that might be a connection too. If you want her Victoria's daughter is Julia White is that what her handle is too? I guess I can't forget now.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you could look at, is she there promoting something, promoting her short?
Half and half. Yeah. Yes. And networking, the same thing.
It's great.
And
Like, so,
Kay, the one that they did the podcast together, I think that interviewed you or something like that.
okay. The guy. Yeah.
Yeah. So part of it's from their film short and a lot of it's networking.
So it's crazy. Like, so I did 20 podcasts. Julia was a guest. She's not even normally the co-host, but she liked this other thing I was talking about. And we connected, and she introduced me. This is her mom, Victoria, and now Victoria's on this thing. And Julia and I talk once in a while through email, and you just never know like how all these things make sense. Gabby's interested in production as well, so now she knows Victoria, so they can maybe talk about some of those things. So a lot of it is like, again, like, yeah, if you get the first 1,000 followers or you start interacting with people. The mentor I work with now, he likes to call social media is like Malibu in the 70s making films. And it is, it's like you ask the right questions, you find your tribe of people, and all of a sudden there's some connections there. And that's actually how all these things work. They don't really, whenever you see like we don't take unsolicited scripts or books, that's a smokescreen. If you're best friends with the publisher, then that doesn't matter anymore. So you kind of figure out how you do those things and make your social profile attractive to like-minded people. He calls them kindred spirits, which I love, is like the way to think about who you can connect with and everything else. So look for kindred spirits, people you want to know more about them. I saw some writer, I don't write about this at all, but he was like, I make sourdough, I go hiking with the baby. I was like, he literally described like my week or something like that. And I was like, well, this guy's got 4 or 5 overlaps. And again, that's where, it doesn't matter that he's not one thing, because I connect with him in 4 or 5 ways. So I start following him immediately, and you don't need, and with that, it's like, let's say your goal is to get 10,000 followers on a platform, and you can do that in 1 or 2 years. You're going to meet a few dozen people who you can genuinely collaborate with, who might take you up a couple levels in your writing, whether that's publishing or collaborating on a movie or whatever it is. Like that's really the secret to this whole thing, is just to start doing
it. I know I say it a lot, but you have a lot of gifts, but you really have a gift in bringing order into, especially people with big visions, even if it's one application, but it's got a lot of moving pieces, like Gabby's. Gabby, your story, it's a memoir, but it's got a lot of moving pieces to it. And the ancillary applications, they're there if you choose to pursue it or whatnot.
Yeah.
And you really help bring that kind of order. You should do a book and call it The Cornerstone of Success or something like that, because it's really when you, like what we've been talking about, identifying kind of what the foundational thing is, because it like you were talking about your, how to be a writer, but that was a broad banner that allowed you to talk about so many other things without it feeling like you were disjointed. There was a natural order to it, even if there's no linear order, there's an order to that bucket, if you will. And I just, for me, I it's hugely beneficial, but I not only applaud you, but encourage you to add that in, like from that context, because you're doing it, but that context of putting the emphasis on how important that is, because it not only helps dismantle fear, because it feels so much bigger, plus you don't know what to do, but then, there's a compass, your word, right? There's a compass to start those small steps. And then, like I said, that's the cornerstone, right? And then build the whole thing. I just think you're really, I've talked to a lot of people throughout my career of different things, and you don't find, a lot of people can be very experienced and they have their methodology and it's proven. But again, you really seem to just take that two-edged sword and be able to go in there and get that one thing. And then help, like, all of us understand, like, you keep plumb liming back to it.
Yeah.
And that's so important before all these other things can get realized, so.
So it reminds me of, I'll talk about Alan Alda again. When he finishes his podcast, he has like 5 questions that he asks all his guests. And one, and they're like, how do you stop a person that believes that he's right and doesn't want to hear from him? But one of the questions is, if you're at a dinner party and you're sitting next to someone you don't know, how do you start conversation with them? And the worst thing that you can do is say, well, what do you do for work? And so the best thing you can do is, what things excite you? What things are you interested in? And then all of a sudden that opens up the whole world, and not how you're paying the rent, but really what is exciting you in life. So.
And that thing, the dinner party question, is the exact same thing as how you're going to meet your kindred spirits online. So the part of the challenge that Greg and I are doing now is like coming up with those. The mentor we work with calls them catnip questions. Like, what's so intriguing they can't not answer it, right?
Yeah.
There's one example where Mike Birbiglia was talking to President Obama. Birbiglia is a comic, and he had like just a minute. And Obama at the time, I'm sure, was speaking to hundreds of people a day. And he said he leaned in to him and he said, I can't tell anyone else this right now. My wife's pregnant. Do you have any parenting advice? And it was such a rich question. He couldn't ignore it. You have to like give him a few minutes of your time.
Right. Because he's used to talking politics and all that, or something that somebody, somebody wants something from him.
If you can find, that's why when I do the podcast, they're like, man, these questions are so different because they've been asked 100 times. Where do you come up with a plot or whatever, some basic thing like that. So 2 that I'm toying with that you can, make your own is, what are you binging right now? That's something I'm talking to screenwriters about. Lets me know what they're obsessed with. Another one, I stole this kind of from Ryan Holiday, is, what's one of your Quake books? And I just write in parentheses, a book that shook you to the core. What's a book that like changed the way you think about life? And they always have an answer. It's kind of vague, but if they tell me that, it's like, oh, they're into the law of attraction, then I've got somewhere to lead the conversation. And I kind of see like, and honestly, like if they're not a reader, I don't want to talk to them about writing. It's funny how many people joined my first challenge. They're like, I want to write, Christian novels. I'm like, well, who are your favorite authors? Like, oh, I don't read any of it. I'm like, well, okay, we're going to have a long way to go then,
Yeah. Yeah. In business, when I was in banking, I asked one investor who was very successful, You always get the deal books and they always tell you what a great deal this is, what a great company it is. I says, how do you winnow out those great deals? How do you realize that this is a good company? And he said, he said two things. One, that I asked the guy, what keeps you up at 3 o'clock in the morning with your business? What are you worried, is setting you up for failure? And the other thing, on plant tours, when he took tours of the plant, he'd watch who the guy talked to in the plant to see whether he was actually on the floor, if he actually knew his employees, if he actually was involved in the operations, or does he just write great deal books?
Yeah.
But those questions that kind of like stop you in your tracks, and you have to ask them, like, what do you want to know about before you die?
Yeah.
Well, so
What's after life? No kidding.
Yeah. Anything where you're piquing their curiosity, I mean, they have to want to answer it. Even if they don't have an answer, like, you stop them. Yeah, like you said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This has been very helpful.
Good.
So, Brock was saying that I started which I've always used social media like in a private way, where it's only friends and family that I really trust, especially since I have kids. But I decided to make a separate one that's public. So this is a very new experience over the last day or so. But I decided I'm going to try to post about a lot of the books that I've read over the last couple of years, and always tag the author, because I figure that's got to be good. I don't know. Anyway, I tagged Suleika, who is one of our classmates' actual friends, has wrote a book that she recommended to me. And I could see that she saw that post.
Yeah.
Which I was like, what a cool thing, because it's a public account that anyone can, drop in and see where they've been tagged. And then someone else that's a friend of a friend that I know has written a couple of books, I posted a blurb that she had posted yesterday. And also I could see that she saw that she came to look at it after I posted. And I figured that has to be good for your metrics and everything, right?
Yeah, I mean, long term, like
bit about like Instagram marketing.
Yeah, and you'll start to, some of them will respond, and some of that is like, can you go deeper with it? So it's one thing to post it and mention it. It's another thing to say that, like, this line she wrote like shook me or something like that. Like this one thing really stood out. I don't know. It's like it's nice to have that I hate to kind of go back to like the metric thing. If you do enough of those, someone's going to reach out to you. You're going to make some connections. Like, I've done these interviews and I've been so like too professional, because usually like Netflix will set up an interview with me and someone else, right? And they set it up, so I don't have their email or contact info. But when I just stopped being so professional, I used to like read questions off and I like wasn't really even listening. I felt like I was like nervous, I started just having conversations. A lot of times I don't even watch the films because I can't really talk about the plot anyway, because we're being secretive about the ending or whatever. So I'm just having a normal conversation. And then it would be like, I would say something about I'd see they had a kid on Instagram or something that was different than what they're hearing, in addition to my obsessions with creativity. And then it was like, I just did an interview with Ed Solomon, who wrote, he created Bill and Ted, he wrote Men in Black. He's been a big writer for a long time. He works with Steven Soderbergh a lot. We talked for like 30 more minutes, and he's like, hey, email me if you have any questions about anything. And it's just like a real like connection that is typically in a situation where it's harder to kind of break through. And it's just like the right kind of questions or the right curiosity. Again, it's just like that kindred spirit thing. So I think if you can not only, I read this great book, you can say like a friend in my writers group, if you even said like, I know her like, you don't really know her, but you're a friend of a friend away, and this part did something about, like talk about some part that stood out that she hasn't heard in a long time. That's more than like, I give it 5 stars, it's like, it's deeper than that. And then we're actually connecting with somebody. It's almost like dating or something, like you're like, it's just that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the guy that after Bill Gates left Microsoft, the guy that took over Satya Nadella, all of a sudden he created all these great products for the disability community. And then I started reading about him. He's got 2 kids with major disabilities.
Yeah.
And so, it just changes the whole way that you're looking at this person. And anyway, I don't know what the point is, but
yeah. Well, just makes them human, right? Because a lot of times you're
Makes them human.
you're
That's
talking to your author you love, and they're up here, and some of them are, but like, I've done this show for a while. There's probably 20 people I'll never talk to, like at the highest level, but most of them want to talk, like especially writers that are not super famous. I mean, the difference in you and them is just they've got a couple more books than you. Like, there's not a wild difference, it's just like Mark Manson's book, the title, I mean, I love the book and different things, but some of it, there is luck factored into that wild success, that 10 million sales and some of that, there's a lot that goes into it. But like, think about everybody who had a book published on 9/11 or 9/12 or that week. No one read those books. They got completely ignored because of what was happening, right? I mean, some of it's very situational. The only way to really know is to do it for a lifetime, and people will find you. The guy who wrote River Runs Through It wrote that book in his 80s, and he was not really well known before that. There's a lot of stories like that.
So there's hope for me, Brock.
There's hope. Yeah. I love this one screenwriter. It's like somebody asked him advice, and he's like, "Don't quit, don't die. You'll make it." So
Don't quit, don't die. I'll remember that.
yeah.
Great.
All right. So
The last question is,
Yeah.
I want to know, like, Gabby, you might want to start thinking about this now. Who's going to play you in your film?
Yeah.
There you go.
Oh,
What
I
actors
already-
are going to play you?
I already have it.
You do? Oh,
I do.
She's got an
Gina
inside
Rodriguez.
scoop.
What? Sorry,
that-
what?
You have an inside scoop.
Oh, no. Gina Rodriguez is who I want to play myself.
Is that
And-
Wednesday? Who's Jenna Rodriguez? Who's that? That's
Jane the
her.
Virgin.
Okay. Yeah.
And then for my husband, I really want either John Krasinski
Oh,
or John Gallagher Jr.
all right.
Okay.
Well, I have an email into Brad Pitt. I don't know.
Yeah. Keep trying.
I'll keep trying.
Yeah, that's a reach. John Krasinski's probably a reach now, but
Yeah.
there's not a lot of Hispanic actresses out there. I might have to play myself. Just kidding.
You never know.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
All right. So I wrote about this a while back. I wrote an email called "I owe a billionaire 2 favors." At the time, my email list was a little smaller, and only one person took me up on this. So I watched Alex Hormozi's marketing training. It was really amazing if you haven't seen it, but he basically did this several hour presentation. At the end, when you think he's going to sell you a $12,000 product, he just gives it away for free. So you can go Google Alex Hormozi $100 million leads, and there's a ton of free software, everything else you can do. But because I watched it, he did a thing where if you buy 3 books, you have to give away 2 of them. So I've given away 1. So I've got 1 more to give away that I'll mail whoever. I'm gonna give you guys a little homework. So it can't be today because I want a little bit more time on it. So you can email me by tomorrow at this time, 2/18 tomorrow. What are your first 3 to 5 steps you're going to do to market your book? What are you going to do this week? Just your plan, your outline. It doesn't have to be super detailed, but based on everything we just talked about, tell me your plans for how to begin, your first couple steps, what you're going to do. And whoever gives me the best answer, I'll send you the book.
Wow.
Had a good answer for that.
All right. Thank you guys so much.
All right.
Nana, it's great to meet you. Let me know if we can do anything else for you.
Yeah, have a good time in Austin.
Yeah.
If you see a Julia White running around, I'll let me show you what she looks like. And put a face to it. I don't know. Can you see?
Oh, yes. Lovely.
Yeah, she's
I'll be on the lookout.
yep. So just go up and say hi. I'll tell her to look for you too.
Okay.
All right. I'll see most of you guys on Thursday. I appreciate it. Email me any questions and I'll look for your responses tomorrow.
Okay.
It's great. Thanks,
Thank
Brock.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so
meeting
much.
you all.
Appreciate it.
Bye.
Thanks.